Yeah, they're historically, though, they're, I dare say, historically awful. What am I talking about here? Well, job approval at the end of the first term. I'm just looking amongst those who lost or didn't run for reelection. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to see which is the lowest number on your screen right now. And an average of polls, my average, Joe Biden's at 38%. He's actually lower than Donald Trump was at the end of his first term. Remember, at the end of his first term, everyone was saying Donald Trump's political career is over. Joe Biden's approval ratings even lower than Trump's was by just a point. He's lower than Jimmy Carter, who was at 44% by the end of his presidency. Not even close to George H.W. Bush, who was at 56%. Saw a nice rebound. But the bottom line is this. Joe Biden came in to end the Donald Trump reign in this country, right? End Donald Trump's political career. And all that's ended up happening is Joe Biden has managed to end up at a lower approval rating at the end of his first term than any president on record, Jessica.
And how are people reflecting on his entire presidency at this moment?
Yeah, so if you think this approval rating number is bad, take a look at this particular number. All right, a good or great president at the end of their terms. Well, Barack Obama, 52% of Americans thought he was a good or great president at the end of his presidency, 2017. Donald Trump, very much behind Barack Obama at 36%. But look at how low Joe Biden is. My goodness gracious, you can't really get lower than 25% in our polarized era, because the bottom line is there's going to be a bunch of Democrats who would say that Biden was a good or great president no matter what he did. But yet it's only a quarter of the country who believes that Joe Biden was a good or great president. It is the lowest number since AP Nork started tracking this back at the end of Barack Obama's second term. Bottom line is Joe Biden goes out a very unpopular man at the end of a 50-plus year political career.
It's so interesting. And there's so many questions too about, like, are we so more divided now than we were back in 2017? Is it Joe Biden? There's a lot there to chew on.
Yeah.
I do want you to talk us through Trump's popularity at this point.
Yeah. So if Joe Biden's numbers are at his lowest point, right, Donald Trump's are right near his top point. We have a little thing up here. I'm so tall, I was managed to actually bump it. Look at this. Trump's record favorable rating. You go back 4 years ago, he was at 38%. Look at where he is today, 47%. That is the highest favorable rating Donald Trump has ever registered in an average of polls. So what we're dealing with is something very interesting, whereby, as I was saying, Joe Biden's at his worst point. Donald Trump is actually at his best point, being with this such a high favorable rating. One other little last thing I will point out, because I want to get to the forecast a little bit, is just take a look at this. Will Trump be a good president? In January of 2017, you saw 48% for Donald Trump. Look at where we are today. A majority expect that Donald Trump will be a good president. So expectations for him are quite high. We'll see.
So there we go. The end of the Joey presidency and into the beginning of the second Donald Trump term. We are going to have to play a lot of 52 card pickup with the news this week because it is moving at a breakneck speed. Joey had some surprising last minute decisions that he made, and we have Alex. Hello, Alex. We're going to put you back up here as co-host. We have but it's been moving at a breakneck speed this week. Donald Trump is just hammering out executive orders, the first of which was him basically undoing approximately 50% of all Joey's executive orders as like the first move. It was, by my count, it was 64. I might be off on that, but plus or minus 1 or 2. But it was the first executive order of Trump was to get rid of approximately half of Joe Biden's executive orders. So the Joe Biden presidency is cut in half, I guess, by that standard. Alex, how are you this week?
I am good. For once, I am on the good side of the establishment by fighting with Whitney Webb. But other than that,
and you started off your tweet thread before the show.
Yes, and it is linking here. But I've only gotten to the beginning of the thing, so I would like to give an outline of that drama. But we can, if you want, we can do it as part of the.
If we do it now, it's kind of going to lose its place in the middle of a general flow because there's a lot of things that tie together. Now we can do it now if you really like to, but it'll just know that it'll make some things be weird later on. It's fine.
Well, I'm just wondering if I want to link this space to people who want to hear about that, if it would be easier if it's up top. That's the only thing on my mind. But
because I was going to introduce some of the ending of Biden, the incoming of Trump, and the executive orders in which this story largely plays a role in. So
yeah, let's do that, and yeah,
okay.
We'll try to do it like not too late, but let's put it in a natural position.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So before we jump into some of the actual executive orders, we have the ladies of The View doing their interpretation of what has just happened this week.
But he also revoked an order, the Equal Opportunity Order signed by Lyndon Johnson in 1965. So not only are we now going back 4 years.
Sue Lyndon Johnson, maybe.
Well, we're not only, he's not taking us back 4 years.
Yeah.
He's taking us back to 1965
Right.
before it was legal for there to be interracial marriage.
That's right.
So interracial marriage is now banned, apparently, according to the ladies of The View.
Are they going to finally fire Goldberg? Whoopi?
Which? Oh, no, I don't believe so.
Are they warm? Like, is this finally their opportunity to do what they've always wanted? What's going on? Why are they bringing this up?
Yeah, so I mean, there were a large number of executive orders, and some of them, undo some things from decently far ago. But of course, the interpretation of them should not be that interracial marriage is now banned just because something involving a time period where perhaps
you see, because he revoked and I think that was the one that's basically been considered unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, right? Is the affirmative action stuff. But because that was before interracial marriage was legal, therefore it's bad, right? So basically, according to the math of the ladies in The View, any revocation of any executive order since before internet, those are set in stone. Basically, you can't touch them because before interracial marriage was legal. Just to be clear.
So we're gonna jump in here to play just a little bit of the inaugural address. Definitely not the whole thing. It was only about a half hour long, but there's only 2 clips from it that I want to play. But I'm going to sandwich them in with a trajectory that we're going from Biden's goodbye swan song here.
Yes, they are.
By this great momentum that the world is now witnessing in the United States of America. As we gather today, our government confronts a crisis of trust. For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. It fails to protect our magnificent, law-abiding American citizens, but provides sanctuary and protection for dangerous criminals, many from prisons and mental institutions that have illegally entered our country from all over the world. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders or, more importantly, its own people. Our country can no longer deliver basic services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago. Or more recently, Los Angeles, where we're watching fires still tragically burn from weeks ago without even a token of defense. They're raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer. That's interesting. But we can't let this happen. Everyone is unable to do anything about it. That's going to change. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster, yet more money is spent on it. than any country anywhere in the world. And we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves in many cases, to hate our country despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly.
So that was basically the start of what I would refer to as the Festivus inaugural address, because it was he was basically just doing a list of grievances for majority of the time.
So you think he's got some issues with what happened the last few years? He wasn't.
Yeah. I think
not completely satisfied.
I think he had a negative opinion on the unfolding of the last 4 years.
Is he going to leave a bad Yelp review?
He very well might. I wonder. There's the ceremonial letter to the next president, the incoming president from the outgoing president, and I'm wondering, whether it's going to be, I fixed it for you. Here you go. It sucked when I got it, but.
I think at this point it's like Biden probably left him a "fuck you, Donald" letter, and then inside was wrapped the "fuck you, Joe" letter that Trump left him, or something. Did he even leave Joe a letter last time? I don't think he did. I don't remember hearing about it.
Okay, so we're gonna leap into Joey's last minute, goodbye love letter. So 20 minutes to go. 20 minutes to go left in the presidency. They're covering the coming Trump inaugural address, the swearing in ceremony, and boom, 20 minutes before they go, they announce that Joe Biden has basically pre-pardoned his entire family. Pre-pardoned his entire family because of supposedly the fear that Trump, when getting access to the DOJ, was going to go on an entire retribution witch hunt of his family. And so we're going to go take a blast to the past, back to 2020, when people were concerned that that's what Trump would do on his way out.
President's reportedly asking his staff whether he can issue preemptive pardons for himself, his family members, Rudy Giuliani. There's a simple answer: no. No, Mr. President, that would be a gross abuse of the presidential pardon authority.
Do you think that those pardons are appropriate? Do you think they would be legal?
I don't think they are appropriate at all.
So this is an administration that came in grifting, and it appears it's going to leave the same way.
Is there an innocent explanation for someone to seek preemptive pardons for family members? Would you do that if you knew you were innocent and just worried about outside forces?
The answer to that is going to be no. And, if you haven't done anything wrong, you sit there and go, what do you need a preemptive pardon for?
It begs the question, why is there a need for a pardon here in the first place? People who've done nothing wrong do not need to be pardoned. And to me, it would raise flags for other prosecutors and other investigators, state prosecutors, not bound by the pardon, to take a close look.
They say that they haven't done anything wrong. Well, why would you be pardoning them preemptively if you didn't think they might have done something wrong?
Have you ever heard of somebody getting a preemptive pardon who was innocent of all crime? Who's just an innocent person? Have you ever heard of that? Just somebody getting a blanket pardon and they're an innocent person?
But no, here it's an effort not only to prospectively pardon people for things they have not yet been charged with and may never be charged with, but also it's the president's own family. It's people that have been covering up for the president in addition to his own family. And so there is a self-interest at play as well. And I think that makes this quite unique.
Your baseline assessment that you don't need a pardon unless you're guilty of something is dead on the money.
Does this concern you? All these preemptive pardons?
Well, it concerns me in terms of what kind of precedent it sets and how the rest of the world looks at us as a nation of laws and justice. In terms of the pardons, you're not going to see in our administration that kind of approach to pardons. Nor are you going to see in our administration the approach to making policy by tweets. It's just going to be a totally different way in which we approach the justice system.
So, if you didn't recognize that last voice, that was our wonderful Joe Biden, specifying that he would absolutely not use the presidency this way, and that if Trump had done it, which he did not, it would have set an awful precedent. It just ties this beautiful little bow on the presidency of Joe Biden.
In his defense, he hadn't seen at the time how the DOJ would be politicized during the next administration.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. That is a scary thing.
Done that he did not think possible previously.
So for those keeping score themselves at home, effectively Trump did none of the things in his first term that they were worried about, and Biden did majority of the things they were worried about in his administration, especially on the way out. That's that. And now, would you guess how the media is reacting to these pardons? Would you say that they are concerned about the precedent, or would you say that they are concerned that they were justified because Trump was definitely going to abuse the legal system?
I expect they would be calling Biden out, mostly because he didn't go far enough and just blanket pardon his entire government, their families, and everybody they've ever spoken to, and all their Facebook friends.
We should note that for career officials at the Justice Department, this is a really crappy day because it starts with these sweeping pardons that President Biden, former President Biden now, is giving to his immediate family. Preemptive pardons for his brothers, Frank and Jimmy, to his sister, Valerie, and then to, I think, a couple in-laws.
Their spouses, yeah.
And that, to a lot of people, this did not go through the regular pardon attorney, the pardon process. And Biden in 2020, when I interviewed him right after he'd been elected, had some very harsh things to say about the idea of Trump giving preemptive pardons to his family members. He said it would set a horrible precedent. Now, Trump didn't do it. Joe Biden did. And we can come back to that subject later in the day. But then beyond that, now these same career Justice Department officials are preparing for a swath of other pardons that they may find unseemly.
Well, look, you could clearly tell that President Trump was really ticked off at what President Biden, now former President Biden, did on his way out the door with regard to the Liz Cheney and other members of the January 6th committee and their staffs. That's where he started his speech, list of grievances at the beginning there, before he went off on other familiar political tangents. In his inaugural address, he talked about justice and restoring justice to the courts, to the system. I think I take your point about it being very controversial what Joe Biden did on his way out the door, but it's going to be just as, if not more controversial, what Donald Trump is going to do, which he promised to do over and over on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
In that building where he is, a lot of violence took place. And
so Dana Bash, in response to Jake Tapper, is basically saying, yes, it's bad. It's bad that Joe Biden did it, but wait until you see what Trump is going to do. Not what Trump has done, not what Trump has a long history of doing, but what he will do. What he will do. So that's Dana Bash's interpretation of these events. Now, Alex, why would you preemptively pardon your entire family this way? What controversies are they tangled up in that might come under inspection?
Look, the fact of the matter is both rationales could work, right? Like, I know I'm taking the other side here, but like, if let's say Trump could have had a time machine, right, and have gone back in time to pardon himself and his family before he left in 2020, knowing what you know now, would that not have been a good idea? Right? Yes, it would. Probably for him and potentially for the country, to be completely honest, because of
so they only really came after him, right? They didn't. To my knowledge, there wasn't much in the way of going after the family.
Yeah, they did go after his family. It's true, but I mean, there were some of his group that went to prison. I believe, right?
Manafort eventually went.
And
Roger
Bannon
Stone,
for other
Roger
reasons.
Stone, and Steve Bannon was done for contempt of Congress.
I know. I just wonder if a pardon would have prevented him from having to appear there to begin with. But anyway, long story short, just preemptively pardoning. I mean, he should have done himself. Honestly, like I guess Biden is too old to stand trial for anything. Honestly, I don't expect him to, be gone after personally. But my point is, we do know that the Justice Department can be politicized, and with that fact in mind, pardoning, your close ones, is not entirely unreasonable. It is an admission that the institutions don't work, right? But then again, the existence of the pardon is an admission that the institutions might not work. So it is what it is, I guess. The question is whether there are other things underlying the pardons that we might find out, and I mean, I think there are.
Well, we can go back in time a little bit, because there is certainly things to discuss now. Not that I necessarily planned it this way, because the world is unfolding as it is, and I'm just reacting to it here. But last week, I went into about a 3-hour story almost of the history of Pizzagate, and the history of Pizzagate comes in and kind of blows up in 2016, the 2016 Hillary versus Trump election, and there were a number of events involving, let's call it hacking or cyber espionage that occurred in 2016 that actually have some relationship to Biden and the current events with him pardoning his whole family. Sort of have not necessarily, let's say, 100% direct connection, but they do have a lot of overlap. So if we go back to 2016, there were 3 primary events that started to derail Hillary Clinton's election campaign. That was her email server story, which, if you want to recap of that, go back next week where I go into it in decent depth, where Hillary Clinton had been running a private email server that did not meet national security specs, had been protecting herself against FOIA requests, deleted a large number of emails, had her staff damage equipment so that emails might not be recoverable, et cetera, et cetera. That was one of the scandals that derailed her campaign towards the end. There was also a hacking of a DNC server at the time that was pinned on Russia. And at the very end, there was also a scandal involving Anthony Weiner and a laptop of his, where an associate of Hillary Clinton named Huma Abedin, who was married Anthony Weiner, got caught up in the email scandal. Now, when Trump took office, if you recall, he was impeached twice. And the first impeachment involved him sending a letter, involved him having a phone conversation with Vladimir Zelensky, who was the incoming president at the time. And inside of that transcript were discussions, one of which being recovery of the DNC server, which it appears Trump mistakenly thought for some reason was in Ukraine. And the other thing that was involved in this phone call that got him impeached was a discussion about Biden and Hunter and Burisma. So Burisma is Alex, do you have a deeper knowledge of Burisma than I do so that you can introduce it, or do we want to go off of my explanations?
I have a separate thread I've done on the Ukrainian biolabs and how Hunter Biden's VC firm funded a U.S. company that was running them. I don't know if you know about that story.
Okay,
it's 100%. It's the wildest thing I've ever heard, and it's true. so I have a thread on that I'm picking up to throw on the space. But so there's and that company was actually working with EcoHealth on other projects. So it's I don't know. It gets what I got some level with that story that I was like, just fuck me. I can't anymore. It's just too much. It's the total schizo feed.
Yeah. I mean, the unfortunate part is that, complicated scandals are complicated and hard to tell in a strict linear order. So the long story short of Burisma is that it was a Ukrainian energy company, oil company, that natural gas as well, that Hunter Biden was in the recipient of about $86,000 a month in salary to be a consultant working with them, despite having absolutely no history in the industry. And at some point, while Joe Biden was vice president under Barack Obama, he got tasked with interacting with the president at the time was not Zelensky, but he was tasked with operating with the Ukrainian government and put pressure on them to get rid of a prosecutor who, depending on how the story is told, was either failing to investigate Burisma or was investigating Burisma and putting too much pressure on them. Now, the Hunter Biden laptop, if we all recall, was at the tail end of the 2020 election, but the whole situation really started in this call with Vladimir Zelensky. So I'm going to read you some highlights. I've linked the transcript. Now, the transcript is not an official transcript, so this is not a verbatim transcript. It's actually kind of shitty what they did. They have national security advisors or investigators listening in on calls, and then they kind of paraphrase the call, and they call that a transcript. So the exact words cannot be relied on from these quote transcripts, but supposedly the gist of the conversation is reliable. So Donald Trump had called Vladimir Zelensky, and he was, congratulating him on a win. And at some point, the president says, "I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot, and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike." So this is a very broken sort of paraphrasing. "I guess you have one of your wealthy people. The server, they say Ukraine has it. There are a lot of things that went on, the whole situation." So again, it's very broken, this transcript. Not me poorly reading it. Now,
I think it's not the transcript that's broken. Honestly, this sounds exactly like Trump's talking.
Well, yes, but someone trying to paraphrase a broken Trump line of speech.
Yeah.
So to put this sort of together, CrowdStrike is how would you describe them, Alex? Would it just be a security firm, or?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny because they had this other massive thing happen to them with the whole broken update thing, right?
Yes, that was 2024's fiasco
right.
with them.
So now a lot of people know about them that didn't know before, but they're basically, I don't know, kind of the antivirus of the era for enterprises, I think, effectively. Like, they just have some software that sits on a ton of machines and is pretty low level. And I guess because of that, they maybe had visibility or claimed visibility into network activity.
Mm-hmm.
Is that basically
so
the deal?
in this particular circumstance, when the DNC's servers were hacked and WikiLeaks got collections of some of their leaked material from that hack, CrowdStrike was who the DNC went to perform a forensic investigation to try to identify the people responsible for their infiltration. CrowdStrike supposedly pinned it on Russians. Okay.
Right.
And so now I don't understand exactly why Trump thinks that the server was housed in the Ukraine, but for whatever reason, he has some sort of idea that it's housed in Ukraine. So what he's asking Vladimir Zelensky for is, hey, can you help us actually get the server? Because the physical server, was never turned over to the FBI, which is true. That is a true thing. The server was never really turned over to the FBI to do any forensics on. And CrowdStrike is the team that said it was Russian involvement.
Is CrowdStrike a Ukrainian company?
CrowdStrike is not a Ukrainian company, at least in their current incorporation. I don't believe they were ever a Ukrainian company, incorporation wise. I don't know how affiliated they might be with Ukraine, but now, so the idea is here that for whatever reason Trump thinks this server is there. He's basically asking Zelensky to help him acquire it so that he can have his team do their own sort of forensics to determine if indeed it was Russia, because this Russian narrative was for a large part fabricated in the broad scheme. So the things that they were accusing Trump of doing to get into the White House and coordinating with Russia, what we now call the Russian hoax, everything was being blamed on Russia whenever it was negative against Hillary Clinton at the time. So then the second part of the transcript that Trump was impeached for goes like this. Good, because I heard you had a prosecutor who was very good and he was shut down, and that's really unfair. A lot of people are talking about that, the way they shut your very good prosecutor down, and you had some very bad people involved. Mr. Giuliani is a highly respected man. That's a little debatable, but okay. Well, he was the mayor of New York City, a great mayor, and I would like him to call you. I will ask him to call you along with the attorney general. Rudy very much knows what's happening, and he is a very capable guy. If you could speak to him, that would be great. The former ambassador from the United States, the woman, was bad news, and the people she was dealing with in the Ukraine were bad news, so I just want to let you know that. I don't know who the woman was in that particular thing. There's a lot of talk about Biden's son. That Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the attorney general would be great. So this is one of the key portions about what Trump was impeached for, because in the language, people, when they impeached him, were interpreting a lot of this as some sort of quid pro quo, where he was basically threatening to not help Ukraine with, let's say loans or different financial distributions that may have been in talks for diplomatic reasons, and that Trump was going to deprive them of those funds and other diplomatic assistance unless they helped him, get Joe Biden and get dirt on Joe Biden. So that was the history of, the very condensed and shitty recap of the history of why Trump was impeached for that. But here it's clear. He's already discussing Hunter Biden. Okay. Yep. He's already discussing Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden's involvement. Now, I want to jump to somewhat of a deeper story on what is being discussed when it talks about this prosecutor and Burisma. So I'm going to play some clips from a Glenn Beck episode where he actually had organized it fairly decently.
Biden's story had been that he threatened to withhold a loan to Ukraine only because the prosecutor Shokin was not meeting anti-corruption standards. Do you remember this? We found the audio during the Trump impeachment where Biden openly said, yeah, I fired Shokin because he was a dirty, corrupt prosecutor, and he was doing all kinds of things wrong. Here's exactly what he said.
I'm desperately concerned about the backsliding on the part of Kyiv in terms of corruption. They made, I'll give you one concrete example. I was, but it just happened to be, that was the assignment I got. I got all the good ones. So I got Ukraine. And I remember going over convincing our team or others to convincing that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a...
You'll call the president. You can't do that. Yeah, I can't. Call the president. They never called the president. They should have called the president. We now know that the White House and the State Department said the exact opposite of what Joe Biden was saying. Now there is new evidence. So we have the State Department communicating with the White House saying, this guy's doing a great job. Great job. He's meeting all of his standards. We're clear. Okay. But everybody knew, according to Joe Biden, that it wasn't working.
That was their big sell when all this came out, was that it wasn't just Joe Biden thought this. It was the consensus of all countries. Like all the civilized world understood that this guy was corrupt.
So we've had now the documents from the State Department saying that's not true. Mm-hmm. Okay. At the time, they're writing how great this guy's doing. And now we have evidence from the EU, where the EU concluded Shokin had met benchmarks on anti-corruption reforms. In fact, it's pretty glowing what they write about him. Now, remember, this narrative came out because what did Donald Trump do? Donald Trump said, hey, he calls up the president of Ukraine. I want you to find out what's going on because there is corruption with Biden, and I want you to look into it. He knew that this was happening, okay?
So I have an article from the New York Post dated August 22nd, 2023. Former President Barack Obama's State Department and several other administration officials were happy enough with Ukraine's former top prosecutor's anti-corruption efforts to sign off on $1 billion in U.S. aid weeks before a pressure campaign spearheaded by then Vice President Joe Biden forced him from office, documents show. The government memos obtained by Just the News and released on Monday contradict the prevailing narrative put forward by Democrats, arguing that Biden's threat in December 2015 to withhold U.S. loan guarantees for Ukraine in exchange for the ouster of Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin from office was consistent with U.S. policy goals. Several officials in the weeks leading up to Biden's December 2015 visit to Kiev had said that they were impressed with the progress Shokin's office had made in the preceding months. One of the documents setting forth conditions for the loans, drafted 1 month before the vice president's trip, listed no issues with granting the funds and said nothing about firing the prosecutor. So I've shared that to the feed and also to the top of the space. So this ties in at some point to the Hunter Biden laptop, because the Hunter Biden laptop contained information about his dealings with Burisma, additionally had emails and exchanges with him and other members of Joe Biden's family in what you could describe, if you take that they are guilty sort of angle, describe business practices that involve selling access to their father and his influence, to selling that as sort of what they can offer companies that they become involved with.
I love that nobody really questions that they were selling access. What they are claiming in order to defend Joe Biden is that was fraudulent, that they weren't actually going to give access.
They were lying. Yeah, they were lying. They were lying to people, saying, "Hey, we'll get you access," taking the money and never providing.
Exactly. That's the defense of the steel man of the Democratic Party, is that they're not anyway. If you want to save Joe Biden, you really have to throw Hunter under the bus. There's no way under where both are safe under this.
Right.
He was. And he's putting his old father on the phone, right? Like, so you have to believe now that he is sort of ambushing him with a call, and then he's saying, "Oh, I got you on the speakerphone here," and then he kind of goes into his like politician mode, because that's Hunter kind of could predict that. And he kind of just says, Joe Biden says a few things, and that's all that Hunter needs. And Joe is sort of like, well, that was weird, and continues with this day. That's the story, right? Like rank fraud by Hunter on multiple directions.
Right. That and now, so when Hunter Biden's laptop, comes out as being reclaimed from from a repair shop where Hunter Biden had dropped it off, but it was in one of his fun crack stupors, and he forgot that he dropped it off at this repair shop. The some details about his relationships and these business agreements and emails that you might have recall, 10% for the big guy being involved as code word that people believe would indicate that the 10% for the big guy would be a kickback to Joe Biden himself. This was what Trump was asking Zelensky to sort of help him understand. Hey, can you find out? It was this prosecutor corrupt? I'm not, I'm under the suspicion that he wasn't. Can you help me understand exactly what happened here? What was he working on? Because word has it that this prosecutor was investigating Burisma and had been sort of uncovering angles that might have implicated Hunter and his father in wider corruption schemes. Now, as we heard from Joe Biden in that clip, which I can post an excerpt from, an individual clip from, he basically deliberately and explicitly gave Poroshenko was the president at the time, a quid pro quo, saying you fire this prosecutor or you do not get this loan, this $1 billion loan. And ironically, the quid pro quo is supposedly what Trump was being impeached for.
Right. By the way, if I can paint this picture a little bit differently for you,
Sure.
What I know is that Burisma, before the Maidan events, was on the side of the pro-Russian oligarchs. Okay, the sort of the Yanukovych sort of crowd, and as is the sort of practice in the Slavic world, you need what they call a krisha, which is like a protection, right? You need a roof. It's the word for roof in Russian. So you need a roof. You need somebody above you to protect, to prevent things coming down on you that are, bad from above, right? From the executive. So what Burisma effectively did. So what I'm saying is, it could well be that the prosecutor was politically motivated and going after them because they were part of the old regime. As part, and you kind of I noticed something here where it was like, why wasn't Poroshenko happy to fire this guy? Right? Either he was a paragon of virtue, which he is not, or he actually was happy with what was going on. I mean, there might have been other reasons, but like these are the two obvious hypotheses here. And I think what was happening is essentially these guys ran to Hunter as a way to protect them from what was coming to them, because essentially Hunter, right, is the son of the viceroy of Ukraine, right? When Biden was like given the Ukraine portfolio, what's happening is he is effectively above the government, as demonstrated by the clips you just played, right? He is able to impose things on the Ukrainian government. So what they did effectively is they're like, we're fucked, right? They're going to come after us because we've been helping the prior regime. What do? Oh, I know. Why don't we go to the Americans for protection? Basically, right? So all I'm saying is the guy could have been corrupt or not, or he could have been corrupt in the one direction or the other, or he could have just been doing his job. But the point is that effectively Hunter was protecting a piece of the old regime that was happy to pay him for the service.
Right. So I'm going to continue with some of these clips to paint the full story here of what that scandal was.
Say, look, he's trying to get dirt on his possible opponent in an election. That's election interference. That's what the press sold you. We told you it wasn't true. We told you he's trying. Eventually, as we did our homework on this, during the trial, we laid it all out on a huge chalkboard and said, Biden is doing exactly what he's saying that Trump was doing. And this whole firing of Shokin smells really bad. So at the time, Shokin was investigating the activities of Burisma and Hunter Biden. who had no experience in the energy industry, yet he was being paid at least $83,000 every month. The European Commission, in new documents, said, based on these commitments, the anti-corruption benchmark is deemed to have been achieved. This is from the governing body of anti-corruption. It was a generally rosy assessment of Ukraine's pace of reforms, according to the efforts of Shokin's Prosecutor General's office. They noted that Shokin, just a few months on the job, had already established a special national and anti-corruption prosecutor's office to aid newly reformed FBI-approved investigative unit called the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. Now, we told you that we had a problem with that. I did, because that was a joint effort from the United States and George Soros. So now, do we have anything about George Soros and what he was saying? Because he's the co-founder, along with the United States of America, of this new anti-corruption. Have any corruption charges standing against this guy? You're not providing us any information. We have no information on why he is suddenly offensive to the United States. But I asked him to resign. Can we get our $1 billion? Joe said yes. So you have the president on tape with our vice president saying, we have no information. We have nothing, but you're holding the $1 billion. And so, I mean, I guess we're going to fire him, but we'd like the information because we don't know why we're firing him. Because the State Department, the White House, George Soros, and the EU all said the guy was doing a great job right before he got on the plane. Guys, what else does anyone need? When this stuff actually starts to be in a trial of some sort, it's over. It's over. Because that is, honestly, that's just the beginning. We now also have new evidence that shows the feds were alerted by Morgan Stanley. They blew the whistle in 2015 and said Hunter Biden and his associates are involved in fraudulent and suspicious transactions. Not only did they flag this, but they then elevated, because nobody was doing anything. The vice president went from Morgan Stanley and went to the SEC and said, guys, you got to look at there is something really wrong. And now through Freedom of Information Act, we now have a presentation that they made to their compliance officers inside Morgan Stanley saying, this is dirty. There is money laundering going on here. Then we also have one more piece from the Washington Examiner. We now know that one of Joe Biden's emails suggest a close Biden family associate, somebody who was named in the warnings by Morgan Stanley and who was working with Hunter Biden, went to work under David Weiss. And he was involved in the conversations on how to shape the stories related to Hunter Biden's work for Burisma.
So there's a lot of things to investigate, and a lot of things that might want to be investigated that would come under the umbrella of this pardon that Joey has put into all of his extended family at 20 minutes before he switched ownership of the presidency over to Trump. Now, that comes.
Is there like a 5-minute rule or something that Trump could have activated, being like, yeah, I know, the president issued this 20 minutes ago. It was completely erroneous. Can we take it back, please?
Yeah, it's sorry, you can't do anything on the last day. You can only do it the day before. Had to be Sunday or nothing. But now this brings us back to one of our favorite recurring people on here, which is Sam Harris. And Alex, your perennially viral clip of him on trigonometry.
I mean, Hunter Biden, at that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared, right? It's like, there's nothing. First of all, it's Hunter Biden, right? It's not Joe Biden. But even if whatever scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, like if we could just go down that rabbit hole endlessly and understand that he's getting kickbacks from Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine or wherever else, right? Or China. It is infinitesimal compared to the corruption we know Trump is involved in. It's like a firefly to the sun, right? I mean, like there's just it doesn't even stack up against Trump University, right? Trump University as a story is worse than anything that could be in Hunter Biden's laptop, in my view, right? Now that doesn't answer the people who say it's still completely unfair to not have looked at the laptop in a timely way and to have shut down the New York Post's Twitter account. Like that's just a conspiracy. That's a left-wing conspiracy to deny the presidency to Donald Trump. Absolutely, it was absolutely right, but I think it was warranted, right? And again, it's a coin toss as to whether or not
Sam, I'm sorry,
that particular piece.
I'm really sorry. I was the one that said we should move on, but you've just said
it.
something I really struggle with there, which is
the kids in the basement.
No, fuck the kids in the basement. I'm interested in democracy. You're saying you are content with a left-wing conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically re-elected as president.
Well, no, I'm content. Well, but the thing is, it's just not left-wing, right? So Liz Cheney is not left-wing, right? Liz Cheney is doing everything in her power
to prevent somebody being democratically
elected. But there's nothing conspiracy. It's not. It was a conspiracy out in the open. But it doesn't matter if it was. It doesn't matter what part's conspiracy, what part's out in the open. I mean, I think it's like if people get together and talk about what should we do about this phenomenon. If it's like if there was an asteroid hurtling toward Earth, and we got in a room together with all of our friends and had a conversation about what we could do to deflect its course, right? Is that a conspiracy? Like some of.
Yes, Sam, that is a conspiracy by definition. So looking back at that clip, you see that Sam has a vague understanding about the potential for, like an institutionalized corruption existing in the Biden family. And specifically that this laptop could potentially contain information about those dealings and the extent, give information about the extent of that corruption. Now, if we fast forward 4 years and we have 20 minutes left in the Biden administration and him pardoning his entire family, it sort of puts a question back to Sam specifically. What did you buy by sabotaging exploration of the Hunter Biden laptop? What did you buy the country? Because now you've given a set of behaviors from Joe Biden on his way out that creates a precedent for what is permissible by a president to the person. You give it to the person who you fear the most exercising those precedents. So I want to know what does he think that he purchased by making this sort of Faustian bargain? If we think it's a Faustian bargain from his normal standards. Alex, as a resident Sam Harris expert.
So you're asking what was purchased by allowing this conspiracy, basically?
Well, so yeah, by siding with the people who suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story, particularly the New York Post's on Twitter and the spreading of the information on Facebook and such. By suppressing that information, what did you buy, and thus hypothetically allowing Biden to win and not be defeated by an October surprise? What did you actually purchase from your utilitarian perspective that allows that makes this bargain worthwhile?
Well, you see, the thing with Sam, I think you're selling him short. He's not for sale. He does this for free. So basically, there's another clip where he talks to Lex Friedman, and it's kind of prophetic. because he discusses about how, well, with the social media as it is right now, it's unclear if we have to fight a war, how we're going to do it. Because if the photos of, dying children start flooding the airwaves, is the public going to be able to maintain? This is before October 7th, by the way. So that's what I'm saying. It's actually legitimately prophetic. Are we able to going to be able to sustain, the kind of like military sort of muscularity that is required, right? So that right there is a vote of confidence to censorship, right? To just keep people in the dark in order for them to feel what they are required to feel in order to do what, whoever it is has determined that they are required to feel.
Well, I've organized this.
That is the thing. If you're about to vote, Simon Harris believes that the information you get should be curated such that you don't risk, making
the wrong choice. Yeah, you shouldn't make the wrong choice.
He's not purchasing anything. He's just telling you.
Now, in that clip, he doesn't mention it, but I believe in that discussion he does, and he talks about the fear that it was another Hillary Clinton email situation. But if you go back to our stream last week, the Hillary Clinton email scandal was a legitimate scandal where everything that was being alleged was true.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I know.
And now I wanted this all ties together beautifully with Trump's first sets of actions. So it's an all nice connected loop here. So if we go back to the 2020. The second 2020 debate with Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Respond, and then we're going to have follow-up
questions. If this stuff is true about Russia, Ukraine, China, other countries, Iraq, if this is true, then he's a corrupt politician.
Right.
So don't give me the stuff about how you're this innocent baby. Joe, they're calling you a corrupt politician.
Nobody.
President Trump, I want to stay on the issue of race. We're talking about the issue.
Laptop from hell.
President Trump, we're talking about race right now, and I do want to stay on the issue of race. President Trump,
I have to respond to that.
Please,
because look,
very quickly.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what.
Is this where you're going? This is where he's going. The laptop is Russia,
Gentlemen,
Russia.
I want to stay on the issue of race.
You have to be kidding. Here we go again with Russia.
So that was the second debate where Biden pivots off of this letter of 50-some security analysts saying that it's a Russian operation, that this laptop is all fake news, right?
Yep.
And one of the first executive orders of Donald Trump's second administration, executive order holding former government officials accountable for election interference and improper disclosure of sensitive government information. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered. Purpose. In the closing weeks of the 2020 presidential election, at least 51 former intelligence officials coordinated with the Biden administration to issue a letter discrediting the reporting that President Joseph R. Biden's son had abandoned his laptop at a computer repair business. Signatories of the letter falsely suggested that the news story was part of a Russian disinformation campaign. Before being issued, the letter was sent to the CIA Pre-Publication Classification Review Board, the body typically assigned to formally evaluate the sensitive nature of documents prior to publication. Senior CIA officials were made aware of the contents of this letter, and multiple signatories held clearances at the time and maintained ongoing contractual relationships with the CIA. Federal policymakers must be able to rely on analysis conducted by the intelligence community and be confident that it is accurate, crafted with professionalism, and free from politically motivated engineering to affect political outcomes in the United States. Now, in that executive order preamble there, he's mentioning that there was coordination. And so the coordination, I have an article from Fox News here. The headline is Biden campaign, Anthony Blinken orchestrated intel letter to discredit Hunter Biden laptop story, ex-CIA official says. A former CIA official testified that then Biden campaign senior advisor, now Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, played a role in the inception of the public statements signed by current and past intelligence officials that claimed that the Hunter Biden laptop was part of a Russian disinformation campaign. Former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morell testified before the House Judiciary Intelligence Committees and revealed that Blinken was the impetus of the public statement signed in October 2020 that implied the laptop belonging to Hunter Biden was disinformation. The lawmaker said that based on Morell's testimony, it's apparent that the Biden campaign played an active role in the origins of the public statement, which had the effect of helping suppress the Hunter Biden story and preventing American citizens from making a fully informed decision during the 2020 presidential election. Although the statement's signatories have an unquestioned right to free speech and free association, which we do not dispute, their reference to their national security credentials lent weight to the story and suggested access to specialized information unavailable to other Americans. They added, this concerted effort to minimize and suppress public disinformation of the serious allegations about the Biden family was a grave disservice to all American citizens' informed participation in our democracy. So if you tie all that together, you have the start of the Biden administration and the conclusion, followed by the beginning of the Trump administration, putting a nice little bow on the whole the whole saga, because now all those intelligence agents have lost their clearance.
And by the way, in case anybody was wondering, this is actually a real cost to them, because a lot of them are working with weapons manufacturers or whatever, that where their clearance is, clearance is like an H-1B in a way, right? You can move between employers, but the employers can re-sponsor your clearance. So you continue to get the ability to get access to top secret or whatever it was before, basically information, right? So let's say there's like a bid out for a contract to do some new thing, right? These guys now are not allowed to see it anymore, if it's classified. So they can't be part of that whole ecosystem, and therefore they lose their contracts, if that makes sense.
Well, not only that, their value as on, because a lot of these are often hired by news stations, right? Well, not news stations, but corporate news as well, to give their opinions, because their security clearance gives them the ability to, at least when they present something, seem like they have secret information that is informing their statements.
Yeah, I mean, that assumes that the media cares about accuracy, or that people check whether somebody has a clearance before they believe what they say. But yeah, that is definitely an element. But I'm just telling you, like, to the degree that they have contracts with companies that trade in top secret or whatever secret classified information in general, those contracts very well might be void immediately, because the condition of employment is the maintenance of the clearance.
Yes. It will be costly for them, and then that's sort of there's a question as to why you would be able to maintain your security clearance when you're no longer necessarily affiliated with the CIA or those intelligence agencies, because that the additional people having that sort of clearance just makes the possibility of someone being coerced or bribed to provide information more likely. So it's a little strange that
there's a whole complex, like this is the addiction of the U.S. government to classified information, right? Because there's a whole complex of organizations that are operating, on that. Just as I mentioned, right? A weapons manufacturer can probably not even see the RFPs out for some new weapon system that the U.S. government wants, because those RFPs are themselves classified.
You might want to explain what an RFP is.
Sorry, request for proposal, right? So let's say like the DoD decides that they need a Super Blaster 5000, right? And they put out some specifications for Lockheed and whatever to bid on. This is not going to be put out as a like on the internet. It's going to be put out through some system where classified information goes. And therefore you kind of lose access to the the classified internet, if you like. right? The ability to even access that information. And then inside the company, you're also sandboxed out of all that, right? Like, so within Lockheed, there's people with and without clearance, and the people without clearance obviously have to be kept away from any classified information that exists in Lockheed, right? So, it's like a big wall that surrounds everything that touches this kind of information, and it's a private-public partnership. Because why the fuck not?
I think to your question, Gator, like they don't just have like blanket clearance, like they're getting access and maintaining it because someone is sponsoring it who's employing them.
Right.
I assume if you're just retired, you don't get to keep it. And there's not like a secret, classified.gov where you can just go view all the recent classified material.
I want there to be, though.
That would be fun. And I also imagine it's somewhat, compartmentalized. Like even inside of Lockheed, I don't think you can just go, view all the stuff just because you have the clearance.
But to the point, though, the having of the clearance gives more credence to something that someone with that label would say, right? So any goofy thing that they say about the truth or falsehood, or that it's a Russian operation, has more credence because they supposedly have access to it at any time.
Yeah, that was the whole point of that, shtick, right? That, well, we're not saying that it happened or whatever, but like, wink, wink, like we have access to information. So, maybe we've seen something that we can't tell you about.
I think for me, the part that was more, it's not the fact that they have a clearance, it's the fact that they worked for the intelligence community, I guess, is the part that I would assume people could put their trust in.
That just makes me suspicious of anything you say, typically.
Well, yeah.
So I find it kind of fun that the entire end of the 2020 election into the beginning of the Trump administration and then into the tail end all involves Joe Biden accusing Trump of going to do things, Biden doing those very same things, and people still worrying about what Trump's going to do next.
All right. In order to celebrate the departure of the last administration, I've shared to the space a clip that maybe you can play. That is our community has, John Pike is in our sort of, Twitter corner, I guess, and he made a custom. Like he composed the music himself, basically, like a dance track of Sam Harris' greatest hits, including the corpses of dead children. So I thought maybe that would be a good way to spend a minute.
It'd be slightly difficult for me to get in real time onto here, but if necessary, I can make it work.
Oh, don't worry. If it's technically complicated, don't worry. I thought it was.
Yeah, the only problem is that in order to play it like right here out of Twitter, I have my own audio being routed, and so it'll like wind up probably like doubling on itself, and that will suck. So I'd have to download it and other stuff first.
Okay, play it. It's fine. It's a minute, and it probably the chorus effect will be a good use.
All right. Well, mute yourself so you don't feedback too.
We heard it initially, but now we're hearing white noise. Did we lose Gator? In my quest to do something. Hey, we heard a little bit initially. I think with your standard setup it works, but with whatever you did, if you changed something, it didn't.
Okay. Well, I'll abandon that for now, and I'll try to get it up for you later.
Sorry. Everybody can just go. It's pinned to the space. You will enjoy it. I promise you. Okay. So what's next?
Well, we can move on to your Whitney Webb if you'd like. And if you, I can play the Jimmy Dore clip that you had if you want me to introduce that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much of that you want to play, but I think it's a good sort of middle of the road approach to the issue.
Trump took the United States out of the WHO. How do I know? Watch this.
Withdrawing from the World Health Organization.
He says, "What's this one?"
Withdrawing from the World Health Organization. Sir.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Ooh. So, but there's a lot of people pushing back on this. Because there's Derek Bros says, unfortunately, this shouldn't be trusted as a long-time win. In 2020, Trump did the same thing and then turned around and handed billions of to Gates-founded Gavi. Gavi is that pro-vaccine non-governmental organization that was founded by Bill Gates. And so the two big donors, or maybe the biggest donors, to the WHO are Bill Gates and Melinda Foundation and Gavi. Those are same guy, Bill Gates. So that's why Bill Gates runs the WHO. That's why you can't listen to anything. That's why the WHO is bad. The WHO is a criminal. It's a criminal organization, and the guy who's in charge of it is in bed with legit terrorists, and he's not even a doctor. All right, I think he's a veterinarian.
He's not a doctor? I didn't know that.
No. So he says that because Trump withdrew the United States from the WHO in 2020, but then he said he turned around and gave money. It's a bait and switch. As millions were pulled from the WHO, then Trump gave billions to Gavi, and then Gavi gave it to. But there's people who push. So Whitney Webb said the same thing. I think Whitney Webb is super smart. She says, to be fair, Trump also left in mid-2020 and then just redirected what was once WHO funding to the Gates-funded Gavi Vaccine Alliance. While leaving the WHO is a positive, it is not a slam dunk summer advertising, especially considering Gates' recent comments on Trump's enthusiasm for his vaccine innovation proposals. I could call lots of names reporting. So I think that maybe that it's not exactly accurate.
I think she's splitting hairs a little bit because if you recall, we were about to hand over our national sovereignty over pandemics to the WHO.
To the WHO.
Yeah. So what, like, that is a slam dunk that's not going to happen, because I remember that being something very stressful.
That was best.
We're actually going to do that. So no, it's a slam dunk in that sense, because the WHO's its own thing. Bill Gates sucks, though. I mean, but that WHO threat was a really.
All right, Alex, you have the floor now to carry from there.
Well, he then continues and covers my tweet right immediately.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I clipped the part where it was introducing it.
Okay, don't worry. Basically, the thing is that Dora continues and basically reads my tweet where I say, look, this is like. I saw that, right? Because that post by Whitney Webb was posted as a quote dunk effectively on Brett, who's, our friend. But I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't even add up, right? Because a president.
Can you explain the dunk? Can you go back to explain Brett's tweet and the dunk?
So I'll tell you, it was a tweet that, I mean, I have a thread and people can go and see the whole thread, and I've put a ton of receipts there already, but I'm just barely getting started. There's so much more to write about that whole kerfuffle. I've just stopped to jump in here. But basically, Brett had a very simple tweet saying, we're leaving WHO. Thank you, President Trump. Right? That was the gist. Like it was like very, very short. Okay, that's what Brett said. And then Whitney Webb shows up and says what Jimmy Dore read, which is, well, it's not a slam dunk, though, because last time he left the WHO, he just redirected the money to Gavi. Okay. So
the premise then is that the World Health Organization is what supposedly we are all in agreement is a bad organization. And so Trump, removing us from being partners with them is a good thing, but any funds that would have supposedly gone to them go to another organization that is either just as bad or just not much better. Yeah. That's the premise.
That's the premise, right? And I will say, first of all, there are many layers of problem with this claim, and the first two layers don't even need any additional resources, right? The first thing is, who says that the entirety of the problem with the WHO is the money, right? Like Dore actually picked up on that and said, like, yeah, but they had this pandemic treaty that they were trying to pass, remember, where they wanted to have control of public health when they themselves decided that we were in a pandemic. Yeah, so it does, like, the WHO is a supranational public health organization that imposes standards and pushes all sorts of things and, does trainings and basically put their hooks into your own public health apparatus. And there are reasons to want to exit it that have nothing to do with financial considerations. That's number one.
So Whitney Webb, just because many people might not know, she is a person who you might call the conspiracy theorist, where she is a person who regularly goes on and describes influence networks and other things that a quote conspiracy theorist used as a pejorative might going into big players who they affiliate with, perhaps documents that have things when read in a particular light sound nefarious, etc. But in regularly interacting with this Whitney Webb person, there winds up being some sort of a competitive sort of, you are not exposing things correctly. You are doing, let's say, a limited hangout. So Brett Weinstein gets characterized as a conspiracy theorist if he discusses certain things that are paralleled, let's say, to Whitney Webb, but he doesn't go far enough. So he is only giving you some of the truth, but the rest of it he is not giving you. He's either part of the system and trying to cover up extra things, or he's just not smart enough to see the full picture.
I mean,
which, by the way, I would point out is the name of Whitney Webb's podcast.
What the full picture or
Limited
not smart
Hangout.
enough? Oh, okay.
Unlimited Hangout is the
okay.
Her website name. Anyway, yeah.
But that's in general how you're approaching this particular dynamic with her. Is that
but just to get a sense of the aesthetic here, when she went after Brett a previous time, she did two things that I thought were very humorous, especially in conjunction. First of all, she took CNN reporting about RFK Jr. not going to the not being sort of proposed for HHS as fact, and she dunked on Brett because you're dumb, you believe that RFK is actually going to get any real power here. And B, she went after him for who his brother worked for, which is, to me, like, that's a red line, right? It's like you can't just bring that up and say, like, your dad was your brother works for, excuse me, where's your full disclosure of 3 degrees of ancestry up and down, left and right, sort of your family tree? Like, you can't, just because somebody worked for somebody and then that person is a brother, you can't just go after the brother and say, by the way, your brother worked for Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel is invested in Palantir, so are you really covering for? It's like, you just can't do that. I'm sorry, that's just not, like, you might see a pattern there, and you might be driven to investigate, and you might find something that's interesting. But just saying your very existence, we should be suspicious of what you say because your brother worked for somebody that is, considered bad.
It's also
even
not like
taking
it's
all
kept
that
a
at face
secret.
value.
Like, he mentions that he worked for Peter Thiel, like, kind of regularly.
Yeah, I mean, the first episode of his podcast was with Peter Thiel. This is not some big investigative reporting, expose here. Anyway, I'm just saying, like, but my whole point is, like, not to really try to take her down in terms of, like, oh, you're so conspiratorial, or I could open with, she thinks that Greenwald and Matt Taibbi are compromised, right? Like,
conspiratorial. When I say it, is not necessarily meant to be a pejorative, because
no, I get it. But I'm just saying, like, there are ways to say, like, well, you have a crazy position, therefore, and I don't really want to do that. What I'm trying to do here is be very, very focused and specific on a specific claim, because she did make a specific claim, and point out the issue, right? So she made the claim that money was just redirected by Trump. Okay. The thing is, this is not how anything works, just to begin with. Even if we accept that the money is some important element, the president doesn't just, like, have money left over in his pocket in the evening and says, like, well, I guess I'm going to buy chips instead, right? Like, there's a budget process, and the money goes back into the budget and goes back out of the budget, and the Congress holds the purse strings and yada, yada. So I found that claim very curious, right? So then I investigated, and I found out that so she was sort of touting this $1.16 billion announcement that Trump had made about funding Gavi. right? So I asked the simple question of how much money did Gavi get before this, right? And after a few rounds of investigation, I found that basically in Obama's last year, they had announced that they were giving Gavi $1 billion, okay, over the next 4 years. So it was 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. And it's apparent that there was some kind of schedule, because it started with some amount like 235, but it basically scaled up to 295 by the end of that period. So by 2018, they were getting 290. They were getting 290 million in support from the United States. In 2019, there was no announcement, but they still got 290 million from the United States. And then in 2020, they made this announcement of 4 years of support for 1.16 billion, which, you know, the faster one among us, the faster ones among you might have noticed, is 290 million times 4, right? So they basically said, we're going to give you the same amount of money we gave you in 2018 and 2019, and we're going to commit to it for 2020, 2021, and 2022 and 2023, right, for 4 years. So that was the announcement, and she sort of portrayed that as he gave Gavi billions, which,
so
you know.
Can you describe what this Gavi is and why we would possibly be upset that money that was going to who would go to Gavi, and why it's maybe not better or something along that?
Yeah, so thank you, because you're giving me the opportunity to bitch about Gavi. I hate Gavi. Gavi's awful. All right, Gavi was part of the organizations that were involved with shutting down ivermectin. They were taking out Google ads, of all things, saying that ivermectin doesn't work. So effectively now we know that the U.S. government was, you know, paying an organization that was, you know, doing ads on Google about ivermectin not working. You know, make of that what you will. But Gavi is the Global Vaccine Alliance. It's first of all, like, I take issue with like them saying like, oh, that's Bill Gates. No, actually, it's co-founded by Gates and the Wellcome Trust, which is another highly nefarious organization that controls effectively biomedical funding in the UK. Right? They're the #1 funder of biomedical sort of research in the UK, and their head at the time that we were talking about in the beginning of the pandemic was one guy called Jeremy Farrar, who is now the top scientist, the sort of chief scientist at the WHO. But Farrar was involved, for anybody who knows about lab leak, was involved in orchestrating the proximal origins paper, and was part of all the early stuff to shut down basically the lab leak investigation. I have a whole thread, if anybody wants to look at it, called "Who Killed the Lab Leak Hypothesis," going into Jeremy Farrar, and it is a hoot. Anyway, so okay, but Gavi is an alliance, let's say, between Bill Gates and Jeremy and the Wellcome Trust, which at the time was controlled by Jeremy Farrar. Okay, but so they're not, you know, I have no love lost for these people. But what does that have to do with redirecting funds, right? And it gets worse, because the article, she eventually pointed to an article to support her claim, and that article actually had a reference that showed that Gavi money was actually promised since February 10th, 2020. Okay, so Trump started talking about leaving the WHO in April and actually did it in July. And this money was in the docket effectively since announced, right? Who knows since when, but announced in February. So not only do we not have any evidence of Trump saying, and I want you to take this money and I want you to give it to Gavi, right? That's, if you want to say like this money was redirected, you need evidence of a specific action of redirection. That was not, we have nothing like that, but also the breadcrumbs we're given are a grant that was before the time that the withdrawal from the WHO was announced, or reasonably even contemplated, because you know, early February, you know, even the pandemic itself was not being taken that seriously. So anyway, so that's the first step, right? So then I kind of made a fuss about this. And then Whitney Webb responded to me and said, well, you're an Elon simp. That was her first response.
You're not just an Elon simp. You're our resident Elon simp.
I am the resident Elon simp.
And that's really that's really a good position for you to hold.
she says this, by the way, because I had done a thread tearing to shreds her podcast on Elon, where she was shitting on the Twitter files. So she's seen it. And I've pointed out a number of errors.
Now, was her angle again? You know, that I am the queen conspiracy theorist. that
yeah.
You
So
guys
she said Taibbi was compromised, and he wasn't
Okay.
really whatever, and also that with Elon, the thrust of the argument that they were making, her and James Corbett, who was her sort of discussion partner in that conversation, was, well, you can't get that high if you're not compromised, right? Which, like, fair enough, but that's not a heuristic to work with. Like, I mean, so a lot of people took issue with me calling her like a black pill dealer or something. Look, if your framework is like literally the fact of your success is evidence of your corruption, ergo nobody with any success can ever be on our side, because them being successful is like proving corruption. I don't know what you want to call that, but like it is absolutely a hopeless place to start from. Anyway, yeah. So that's. Oh, sorry. And then we had a second wave of podcasts from like a number of her friends, including people like Due Dissidents or Savvy Sabs, or anyway, there was a few others that did numerous podcasts, and they focused on Brett dunking on Webb for this claim, Walter Kern dunking on Whitney Webb for this claim, but nowhere do they get to the point where they say, and by the way, she never had any evidence that the money was redirected, and even the evidence that she did provide to show that there was, a breadcrumb that was consistent with redirection was wrong.
Is the gist of the claim that money was redirected a misreading of the money that was not going to the WHO then, and the 4-year roll-up of the money that would have gone to Gavi, pretending that it was a 1 year, and noticing the difference between what the previous disbursements for 1 year and then this 4-year disbursement, but misreading it as 1 year? Is that like the gist of where they
there is a part of that, yeah, because the article she cited keeps comparing the expenditure to WHO for 1 year and this sort of 1.16, and puts it like, well, isn't this bigger than that kind of frame, which again makes no sense. But that article was a little bit more careful, saying things like, well, what really changed if we're taking this and we're giving it there?
Mm-hmm.
But then the title went a step further and said it was a bait and switch. Okay. And then she read that, and she had in the back of her mind that money was sort of moved somehow. And then she said it was just redirected. Right. So we've gone from, well, it's off. In effect, it is offset, which is still a misunderstanding. Right. But whatever. Okay. Like you can sort of get over that. To, oh, it's a bait and switch. To, oh, the Trump redirected that money from here to there anyway. And then from there you go to, so this is why, it's not that, it's not a slam dunk that we left the WHO, because Trump redirected the money last time around.
Okay.
So this is the whole.
So I have a question then. This is half practical and half theoretical, let's say. So Whitney obviously is, let's say, annoying you personally because she's going after mutual friends of ours, but she's in this space that you and I might travel regularly, where we're talking about things that might be called conspiracies frequently, and we are all, you and I are trying to get to the truth of certain things. And she is coming in and just accusing people of either not being good enough thinkers or intentionally trying to hide things. So there's the personal component of that. But from let's say an impact component, she's bringing attention to something that you would agree is a shitty organization. If, regardless of her being correct or incorrect when it comes to funds being rerouted, if she is correct in what they do and the things that we would disapprove of, and it brings attention to it, and let's say up the chain gets them to focus on defunding it or removing partnerships with it, is that not at least a decent consequence?
Right. So first of all, I brought Giorgio up on the stage because he's another person who sort of, I think, saw me pushing back on this and started digging into it, and then he started finding stuff, and he's done a lot of very good analysis on a lot of the elements. So I think some of what I said might have been actually part of what I learned from his research. But so I don't know if he wants to jump in, but I will answer your question. And I think part of what annoys me actually is that I think it goes the other way, right? First of all, if you make easy mistakes, right, there are things to dunk on these guys for, right? And you could even make your same point in a slightly different way, right? Instead, what you're doing is saying, don't have hope because we left the WHO. Yeah, I know they were doing a pandemic treaty, but $200 million might be redirected to another organization you don't like. Who cares? Right. So that was the angle she went with. And what's worse is, you know what, if this ever became a big enough issue, they now have, let's say we're in some world where, what Whitney Webb says, counts and people pay attention to it. She's discredited herself because she's made a claim that's false. Right. So that is going to die on the vine. And it's basically the thing that we've been talking about in the previous times. If you rush to a conclusion, you've now blocked your eyes from what is going on, because now that's the frame that you look things through. And, you start creating a framework that might be built on, you put the conclusion first and you find the rationale afterwards. And then, you keep doing that. And before you know it, you're lost. So let me just give you the part of the punchline of all this is that some of her fans sort of saw all this and started getting involved, and they made a different claim. They're like, well, she was wrong on the facts, but she was actually right, because there was a $4 billion COVAX grant that went through Gavi, which was voted in December 2020. Okay. And therefore, yeah, they did redirect money to Gavi. Right now, there is no evidence that that money was repurposed in any way from the WHO grant. That money was spent in 2021. In 2021, the U.S. went back into the WHO and gave them more money than ever. So it wasn't even even any kind of offsetting. And that was an advanced marketing commitment for vaccines. So basically what they said is, this is money that we will pay to vaccine manufacturers to make sure that they spin up the factories. This is like a guaranteed purchase, let's say, so that we know they can spin up the factories, that they can give COVID shots to underdeveloped countries. Right. So this is what that was. But somehow they found that, and now they're hanging on to that idea that, well, she didn't cite this, right? Her evidence didn't say anything about this. But since there was, a December 27th, $2.2 trillion bill that contained $4 billion for COVAX, and even though Trump, when he signed it, protested the international aid that was included and said, I don't want this, right? That means that she was still right that Trump redirected money to Gavi. This is where we are, right? Like, we are now wildly spinning out of control and finding all sorts of things to say that even though she didn't have knowledge, right? The definition of knowledge that I know is justified true belief. She had a belief, and it was true, but it wasn't justified, is the claim. It was retroactively justified because, we may have made a math error in our calculation, but it turns out the result was right anyway. This is the level of copium we're at. I don't know, Gator, if this is helping you at all.
Well, I guess my question is, your assessment, like, I'm not defending her in any way, because I really don't know her work that well enough to have a frame of mind of how often she's kind of sloppy. But if she's sloppy, the question I guess I would ask is she effective in making issues we might care about more popular, despite the fact that she's, shitting on people and screwing them over in the process?
I don't know. But the thing is, I'm not in a position to make utilitarian calculations here, right? I can't tell you, is she a net good or a net bad?
Well, I'm not asking that. I'm just asking if she's effective towards, like, getting people to pay attention to the topic.
I don't know, because, for all I know, she could be demoralizing people, because effectively, if there's no way out, then why even care, right? Okay. But I'm not gonna speculate. What I'm sort of trying to say here is something different, right? I don't work on utilitarian ethics. I'm working on sort of virtue ethics, right? And what I'm saying is this: we want truth, right? So if we want truth, we want to find people who we can trust to tell us the truth, or if they make a mistake, to correct it.
Mhm.
And for me, this is what I call interactive epistemology, where you poke people with fairly small things that you can find if you just check what people say. You know, sometimes you'll find something and it'll be a mistake, and it might be an innocent mistake or not, or whatever. But if you poke them with it, you have access now to something a lot more useful, which is how they react when they are shown a mistake, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you probably know that my friendship with Brett started when I did the same to him. I found a bunch of mistakes. Arguably, they weren't that big. And what he did was he went to on his podcast, and at the top of the next program, he said, "By the way, I have a correction to make," and that was that. You know, there wasn't any, "Oh, you're an asshole" or whatever. It was just like, "Oh, okay. Well, you know, that's bad. I should probably correct that." Right. So there are two different ways to approach this sort of thing. One is to call me an Elon simp, which I don't mind if you correct your stuff, but if you don't, maybe don't do that. Or one is to say, well, you know, that's bad. What that does, though, for me, right, is that when you say something, I will then take into account that if this is something that you keep saying, if there was an error and somebody told you about it, you would fix it, right? I can guarantee, I can sort of trust that there's some sort of feedback loop with you at the center that is self-correcting.
Mhm.
If you come after me, right, and attack me, then I, you know, if I sort of by inference sort of expect that you do that in general, then if there is a mistake and somebody comes to you, you're not going to fix it, which means that, again, your stuff should be considered, you know, suspect. You know, like I then need to go and check everything you say, even if you say something interesting.
Now,
right?
as sort of quantification goes, Whitney Webb has about 470,000 followers on this platform, which
Wow, holy shit! Does she really?
Yeah, I just checked that now. I didn't know exactly what her. So
I mean,
she's not.
I can add less, you know, detailed commentary to Alex, which is that, you know, during COVID, I listened to a good bit of her content, and I would say not super impressed.
Okay, so I would put her not necessarily in the top, but among the higher accounts. So when she comes after someone, it does
IDW
possibly make a splash. So
yeah, I guess. I mean, it's fine, right? Like, I don't. Sorry, I just want to finish my punchline for all this. Why am I dragging you all through this drama, right? Other than, you know, like Alex had a drama with a big account, which isn't news exactly. The reason is that I think reality is about to get completely fucked.
Mhm.
Right? Like, things are going to get wild, weird, strange, like absolutely confusing. If the Trump administration starts dumping documents in public, and then we have, you know, AI progress continuing the way it is, and just, you know, adoption of social media and all the psyops that are going to be, you know, they're only going to get better and more sophisticated. Things are going to get wild over the next 4 years. So I think, you know, what I'm doing, and what I think I would advise all of you to be doing, is to be keeping a ledger of people in your mind, right, that are careful, because you can't afford to make a mistake on one side or the other, right? You can't afford to start developing false beliefs, even if you think that it helps you in some way right now, because we don't know where any of this is going. So, you know, the most valuable thing you can have is a list of people that, you know, are at least trying to get it right and have the ability to control their ego enough to how to call it, like correct themselves if a mistake is shown to them, so that, you know, you know there's some feedback loop there. Like, to me, that's what I'm trying to do, and that's why I'm advising others to do, and that's what I'm trying to. That's why I'm pushing on this particular thing, because I think it's a great example of not just how Whitney Webb is has a broken feedback loop, but how she has this fawning clique of, you know, podcasters and whatever that will just jump in front of her, like, you know, the weird nerd Elon Musk meme, basically, to take a bullet without even actually going into the facts. I don't know, Jernio, if you want to sort of step in here and cover anything I haven't But that's basically my motivation for all this, is that it doesn't matter if you are pro regime or anti-regime, and in some sense, if you're anti-regime, I hold you to a slightly higher standard, because what you say can be used against us.
So if I were to try to let's say defend you, so to speak, from a criticism that this is petty and only because a friend of yours was getting what they call clapped back on Twitter, this is not really about that for you. It's about the fact that this person who is, let's say, in a similar space and talking about similar topics is pretending to be more thorough than they actually are, and is not reacting to updates to that information in a way that that bodes well to the longevity of being able to make sense of the future that we're going to embark on, where, let's say, you see a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti and you can tell it's fake because the spaghetti looks terrible, but pretty soon you're going to believe that Will Smith is actually eating that spaghetti.
Yep.
And if you didn't get that joke in the crowd there, the ability to synthesize video and make and images and video and now text in large volumes is going to make authenticity of what happened when be very, very difficult. Now, those problems have existed. So it's people fabricating documents and trying to make them look older and more authentically old, on the order of tens of years, decades, or even longer. Those sorts of things have existed for a long time, but at some point we are going to be super saturated with fake material that we will likely not be able to really know what was authentic without doing a decent amount of legwork. It's not going to be handed to us that something is going to be authentic, because usually things are authentic.
Well, provenance matters, right? We fall back to, where did it come from, and who can tell you that, and whose sourcing can you trust? But ultimately, also what matters is being able to offload some of that legwork to people who are at least trying to get it right and have enough humility to correct themselves when it's pointed out. Sorry, let's let Jonah talk.
Sure.
Because I think he was trying to jump in.
Hey guys, I just jumped in, so I missed the entire first part. I have no idea what you guys how much you talked about it, but did you, Alex? Did you guys basically go from the top, like your thread, and go all the way through what happened?
Yeah, we went from the top. Yeah, so I've covered the bases, but if you heard me talk about something and I didn't, good to hear you, by the way. This is the first time I think we're on voice, but yeah, if you heard me skip something important, then definitely.
Well, I haven't heard much at all, but going off what I did hear, I mean, the thing with Whitney, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm not exactly sure and it's really irrelevant to the conversation. What her personality is or what her problems are, or whatever. I mean, the point is, she got these objectively false things. And she presented them as fact. And, people are saying, well, it's semantics and it doesn't really matter, and, blah, blah, blah. And it does matter, because the whole point of her initial tweet, this is what gets lost. The whole point of her first tweet to Brett was to kind of basically say, it doesn't matter that Trump removed this money from who, because behind the scenes, he took the same exact money and directed it to Gavi, which is basically WHO 2.0. And that was kind of her point. And she was totally wrong about that, because the money that there was no redirection. First of all, the only result of Trump removing money from WHO was that WHO got less money that year. And in her citations, she cited these articles from mid 2020 about how Trump pledged $1.16 billion to Gavi. But what Trump was really doing was restating the USAID funding of Gavi, which had already been announced in February 2020, for many months earlier.
We went over
that. Okay, fair enough. So the point is, it's not semantics, and there's a lot of stuff going on. It seems like with Whitney, and I'm just speculating here, but it seems like she looks for a narrative, or she has a narrative. She has kind of this one-dimensional worldview where, everything is basically a conspiracy and connected. And I just saw a video of her on some podcast like 2 days ago, where she's implying that Glenn Greenwald is also an agent or a spook or was connected to Palantir, and she's like, well, I'm not saying I don't know, but I don't know. Look at these dots here. I mean, she does that with everybody, and it's really, when you actually listen to it enough, it's very simplistic. It's very one-dimensional. And then, to my surprise, this was the first time for me this week, when you really dig into the sources that she's citing, you realize not only is it one-dimensional and simplistic, but it's really not that deep. I mean, she takes a narrative that she has, a bias that she has, and then she just kind of throws a wall of citations and says that's what happened. And it takes like infinitely more energy and effort to correct somebody when they're 80% right and 20% wrong, and to correct the bullshit. It takes infinitely more effort and energy to go through each of those sources, which I guarantee you she grabbed off the internet after like a 2-second Google search and just threw them on her tweet. But when you actually research them, it's much more complicated. It's still incorrect nonetheless, but much more complicated and full of BS than you would expect at the beginning.
Yeah. So, sorry, I have a 3D printer here who just choked on his filament. Oh well, that print was going to take another 3 hours. So yeah, basically that's I don't know. For me, we can talk all day long about motivations of people, and I find that that's like unprofitable in terms of like, finding something to work with. And I just like to do what I described, because whether her sources support her claim is something I can adjudicate, right? It's fairly straightforward, and then her reaction is also pretty easy to see, and then that puts together a story that is a lot clearer, and you don't have to go into all the depths of her book or whether Gavi's a good organization or anything like that. You can sort of see a small little self-contained story that demonstrates, I think, enough for people to be skeptical about,
And
the hygiene, I guess, that goes into it.
I think a lot of her followers assume she's a lot smarter than she really is.
If you see the commentary behind under her posts, or if she's on a podcast or whatever, I mean, it's a routine.
They're just following. They're just following.
She's the greatest investigative journalist of her generation. That's like that shows like that. These particular words show up all the time. I mean, I was kind of joking, but not. If you apply the Whitney Webb filter to Whitney Webb, she's obviously a deep state plant. No doubt about it. Sent to demoralize the dissidents.
I mean, it's cultish, and then she calls everybody a simp or whatever. I mean, she just attacks people. And also another thing she does too is like she'll get like 1,000 replies, and some of them will be really good and really substantive, and she'll only reply to the ones that are the lowest hanging fruit. Like somebody calls her, a dumb bitch or whatever, or somebody, says something mean to her. But she doesn't really, when she's really in a corner, she just kind of moves on,
And again, like in some way, I want to sort of say that, having been on the other side of that, some people are just insistent and wrong, and then just continue to do, just say their thing, and usually I'll just block them and move on. But I make a point of trying to engage, at least, right? Trying to see like what are you talking? Like I want to fully understand what you're talking about. I might dismiss it, but I want to know that I fully understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, on the substantive things, you have to. When somebody corrects you and presents data, and you just ignore it or give a non-response like she did with you. Well, Gavi 2020 funding. Look, that's not a response, and we've repeatedly, you and me both, have presented in many threads with her. And by the way, did you speak earlier in this Twitter space about the other journalist, whatever his name was, Ryan Christensen at the Vagabond, and his article?
Derek Brose, you mean?
Well, Derek Brose is the author. Yeah, you're right. Derek Brose is the author. But then Ryan, I think his name is Ryan Christensen or Kristen or something.
The Last American Vagabond. No, I didn't speak about him. No, and his whole thing. No.
Well, he's doubled down on the claim too, so he's posted it as well. So,
Anyway, long story short, it's like it was fascinating, especially because Journo has followed a lot of the podcasts and has summarized them, about how they're covering this. It's like you're pulling a little thread, and then a whole sweater comes out where you can sort of see a narrative being shaped in real time. So basically, the title that a lot of the supportive podcasts are going with is MAGA attacks Whitney Webb, right? Where MAGA is me, Walter Kern, and Brett Weinstein, right? It doesn't matter.
Well, have you fulfilled your attack poodle quota for the week? Is that?
I don't know. It's still Sunday. Who knows? Somebody might.
Yeah, I not only did I watch some of those podcasts, to my knowledge, I've watched all of them in full. And it's like the exact same response. It's mega supporters attack Whitney, but oh, look how they got owned. She's got the data, she's got the sources, she's got the receipts. Oh, and then they respond about the 2020 articles, but they don't actually go into the depths. They don't actually look beyond her own responses and really dig into it.
Yeah, it's a nice little microcosm, and it kind of tells you as well, right? When we see narrative shaping up on like the big stage, it seems like there's like some invisible hand sort of moving them, but it's like we just saw it here happen between 20 people, right? Like one person said something, somebody else picked it up, they stated it differently, then somebody else said something, then it's going to interpret it in some way, and before you know it, MAGA attacks Whitney Webb. By the way, like Brett is, I guess, a Trump supporter at this point, but he's like very reluctant and has not been one for, I don't think you can call him MAGA or Walter Kern likewise. And for me, the farthest I got is that, I would probably vote for him, reluctantly, given the alternative in this, the last election. I don't vote because I'm not a U.S. citizen, so it doesn't even matter. But like, all I'm saying is that like, we are the lamest MAGA. You could probably, this isn't exactly the, I don't know, North Arkansas Tea Party Club.
Yeah,
anyway,
for
Gator,
sure.
right.
It's just a smear. That's all it is.
Gator, I'll give it back to you. If you have more questions, feel free to move
Well,
on.
I mean, if that sufficiently explains the controversy, that's great. And if you feel that you've explained the details,
do you feel you got a good bird's eye view of the drama?
Yeah.
Well, let me ask.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask. There's a little delay here. I was just going to ask how well did you cover that COVAX $4 billion funding in December, the omnibus and the 80% support by Congress and the veto override, all that stuff. Did you cover that?
No, but I mean, I briefly mentioned it, but I want to sort of dig into it deeper before I cover it in my thread later. So I haven't really gone. If you have something brief, you could probably go into it.
Well, I don't know if it's brief, but basically, one of the responses, which is kind of an afterthought, they kind of thought of this afterwards, because to be clear, Whitney in her responses never even talked about that funding. But there was, on December 27th, the $2 trillion omnibus bill, which was passed, and it had stuffed inside it the $4 billion of COVAX AMC funding, basically using Gavi as a pass-through. Am I stating that correctly, Alex?
That's my understanding. Yeah, you need to understand what an AMC is, which is the Advanced Market Commitment, which is basically like when the government wants a private organization to manufacture something, it helps for them to say like, here's a bunch of money. We're gonna basically buy it from you even before you make it, so that you can go out and buy the factory equipment, whatever, increase your capacity. And here's some money.
Yeah, well, basically, there's a small group of people that are trying to, I guess, gaslighting is the proper term, say that the December 27th funding, which, to be clear, that bill had, I believe, about 80% bipartisan support. Mitch McConnell had a veto override vote planned for December 29th, and this was 3 weeks before Trump left office. That COVAX funding was going to be there whether Trump agreed to it or not, whether he signed the bill or not, and it had absolutely nothing to do with pulling out of WHO, 6 months, 8 months earlier, and had nothing to do with switching funds that were originally for WHO. It's just total gaslighting, not even remotely the same thing. And if they want to try to say, which they are, that, well, yeah, but under Trump's administration, more funding ended up going to Gavi. Okay, but that's really different. That's very different than the implication that that was made and the exact claim that was made by the earlier tweets.
Yep.
Okay. I think this would be a good
I didn't
position.
know about the planned override vote. I'll look into that.
I think this would be a good position to solicit, audience participation here. If we have anyone who wants to come up and voice their opinion or thoughts on anything we've been discussing, and perhaps mention something that we haven't covered yet. We do have a couple other topics to discuss, but I like the pseudo halfway point at the moment, and I like to get the audience to come up. If you'd like to request to speak, I'll give you some time. But if not, we're going to move forward. So I'm going to give you a couple of moments here to do that. Now, we still have a decent bit to talk about. Not all of it necessarily has to get done today because we always wind up with things at the tail end. We have ICE picking up rather fast this week and gathering up people to deport. That's been fairly controversial. We have Elon Musk having poor arm control and causing a bit of a kerfuffle. We have some new large language models coming out of China that are causing some ripples. And we also have a new task force for AI competition at the federal level, trying to compete with China for AI supremacy. We also have Doge losing Vivek Ramaswamy and also coming up and meeting some early lawsuits. So there's a lot to go into, and we probably won't make most of the rest of those. But it doesn't look like anyone wants to comment, and that's okay. But I think we'll move first to Elon Musk and his inability to control his arms.
Neo-Nazis across the United States celebrated when he did that. That should be some indication to everybody about why this is so important for him to call out. Now, what has he followed up with? Jokes about Nazis. Jokes, like it's okay. And then showing up in a video presentation to the far right folks who are the most anti-Semitic in German politics, and and standing up for them and telling them, "I'm for you." That's bad for the United States. It's bad for Jews across the world. It's bad for Germany. And President Trump ought to be calling that out. If he doesn't agree with Elon Musk, if he doesn't agree with two Sig Heils at his own rally, and backing a party that backs Nazis, then he ought to say so. Why?
So, Skylab, come up and give your thoughts, since I think you were doing it for the halfway mark there, and then we'll continue talking about Elon Musk.
Well, I mean, the Elon thing just seems silly to me. I mean, and it feels like we've been through this many times. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So it seems like we've been through this before with the AOK sign, and it sometimes has real world consequences. Like, the one guy was fired from his job because he was cracking his knuckles. It's just stupid. And I actually requested to be speaker because I wanted Alex, if he could go into the DeepSeek, because I feel like I don't really get it. I'm not very technical.
DeepSeek is coming up, so
okay, all right. So I'll hang on.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to get there. Now that we have a vote of confidence from you, sir.
So
no, I really want to go into it because the rivers of cope that are coming out, and then the reactions to the rivers. It's again, like the model is a model. It's cool, we have it, whatever. But like the reactions on social media have been just absolutely fucking wild. It's just like I know we'll get to it later, but like I want to say, if the future is people with, I don't know, like lefty generalist commentators and like geopolitics commentators and historians and whatever making commentary about AI progress, I will seriously consider harming myself. It's just absolute, like
right. I'm gonna get the suicide hotline for you.
I'm not an AI researcher, but god damn it, man! Like they're like 6 degrees away from what's actually happening, and the facts they're using are like 6-hand facts, and then they go somewhere completely crazy, and you're like, oh, this is the discourse. Jesus, no. All right. We'll get there.
Yes. So, I mean, look, we can start going in there since we're starting to derail the Elon Zig Heil supposedly. I'm sure most people have seen floating around. It's kind of hard to avoid. It's both viral on the internet and on news that Elon Musk had placed his right hand over his heart and threw his hand out to the side in a form that made people think of the Nazi salute, the Sieg Heil. And it has been about a week-long news story, basically saying that Elon Musk has Nazi sympathizing tendencies. And the coverage that I just played there is basically accusing him of being a Nazi. Now, I'm not 100% sure what Elon was intending to do with his salute there, whatever gesture he was intending to make. But I can say it would be very peculiar if he decided to do a Nazi salute once and then never do it again, because a salute is a formal greeting, and you should probably keep up the formalities of the greeting if you're really that deep of a Nazi.
By the way, I don't know if you know about this, but what he was saying is "my heart goes out to you." So he was going with his heart and like kind of throwing it to the crowd. That was kind of what he was aiming for, which I admit did not come out like he might have expected. But the other part is that the Nazi salute does not include the heart part, right? That is the Roman salute that has the heart, and that goes out to you is the extension of the arm. And fun fact, this is what used to be the Roman salute was part of like the U.S. sort of Pledge of Allegiance and like classroom education and everything. And when the Romans sort of went for the extended arm as part of their salute, that was removed, but the hand and the heart remained. So it's almost like a fork, right? You've got the Roman salute that has both, and then the Nazi salute is only the extension of the arm, and then the sort of the I pledge allegiance thing is now only the hand on the heart. I don't know. I find that very interesting as a sort of genealogy of salutations.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm going to take the opinion
that
it's.
Accuse him of something. He actually did the Roman salute. Get it right. God damn it.
Well, regardless of whether the salute it's supposed to be, if you're really imagining that Elon Musk is going to, be part of some sort of neo-Nazi, faction of this MAGA presidency, I think you're kind of screwed, because he is still currently, I think, the richest person in the world, and if that's really what he wants, that's what you're going to get.
And he's got some pretty big rockets. Not gonna lie.
Yeah,
he's got some pretty fucking massive rockets, and they can go in both directions. I don't know. I surely wouldn't hope for him to be. But the fun part is that a lot of this sort of anti-Semitic thing is getting played up, and like people don't seem to notice, I guess on purpose, that the ADL came out and defended him, and like a bunch of other organizations that. If anything, my concern with Elon is not that he's anti-Semitic, but rather that he is taking, what I consider to be the wrong side.
He's a dirty Zionist, according to you.
Yes. Well, the interesting thing is if you see his change of position throughout after being called an anti-Semite, to the point where he started calling other people anti-Semites. But anyway, that's another story for another day. But like, I don't know, man. Like to call this like an anti-Semitic thing. If the ADL is telling you that they're fine, like, I don't know. Take it from them. The Jews are not in trouble.
So tying somewhat smoothly into this is we have a new project Stargate that was announced, which is like the Manhattan Project for AI, I guess.
So my first day back from having a nice life, it's my honor to welcome 3 of the world's leading technology CEOs. And in the case of Larry Ellison, it's well beyond technology. He's sort of CEO of everything. He's an amazing man, an amazing business person. But to announce the largest AI infrastructure project by far in history, and it's all taking place right here in America. As you know, there's great competition for AI and other things, and they're coming in at the highest level. We're joined by Oracle Executive Chairman Larry Ellison, SoftBank CEO, my friend Masa Yoshi-san, and CEO of OpenAI, and I would say the by far the leading expert based on everything I read, Sam Altman. So that's great that you're coming in together. That's a massive group of talent and money. Together, these world-leading technology giants are announcing the formation of Stargate. So put that name down in your books, because I think you're going to hear a lot about it in the future. A new American company that will invest $500 billion at least in AI infrastructure in the United States, and very, very quickly, moving very rapidly, creating over 100,000 American jobs almost immediately. This monumental undertaking is a resounding declaration of confidence in America's potential under a new president. Let me be a new president. I didn't say it, they did. So I appreciate that, fellas. But it'll ensure the future of technology. What we want to do is we want to keep it in this country. China is a competitor and others are competitors. We want it to be in this country, and we're making it available. I'm going to help a lot through emergency declarations, because we have an emergency. We have to get this stuff built. So they have to produce a lot of electricity, and we'll make it possible for them to get that production done very easily at their own plants if they want, where they'll build at the plant, the AI plant, they'll build energy generation, and that will be incredible. But it's technology and artificial intelligence, all made in the USA. Beginning immediately, Stargate will be building the physical and virtual infrastructure to power the next generation of advancements in AI, and this will include the construction of colossal data centers, very, very massive structures. I was in the real estate business. These buildings, these are big, beautiful buildings, are going to employ a lot of people. And physical campuses in locations currently being scouted nationwide. They're making their choices of locations.
So that's the announcement there. It's going to have big, beautiful buildings and big, beautiful data centers, and everything's going to be, big and beautiful and wonderful. Alex, do you have more information on this project that is coming online and what it's going to supposedly aim to solve?
Yeah, I mean, so this is interesting. I don't think it's been done before as such. It's basically a very large captive infrastructure company, because the only people that it's going to serve is OpenAI, right? Like, this is a data center company whose only customer is going to be OpenAI. Okay, so it's almost like OpenAI founding their own host,
okay,
that operates and fundraises independently of them.
Okay.
In practice, this is what this is. Now, the interesting part is that, Masa-san came in, and obviously, SoftBank makes big bets. They have been known to sort of, 10x the funding that anybody asks for. Then there was Oracle, and there's an interesting little story there that people haven't picked up on, which is that Oracle and Larry Ellison used to be working with Elon on XAI stuff. And in fact, the first location of Stargate in Abilene, Texas, was an XAI, initiated sort of activity. But somehow it seems that Elon has decided to go on his own and not work with Ellison and Oracle. And then all of a sudden you see this announcement that Elon seemed pretty bemused by. But you have to understand, like, this is basically, like Ellison sort of now teaming up with Sam Altman. By the way, Gator, quick, do you know what Sam Altman's middle name is?
I do not.
Harris.
Oh, good.
Moving forward.
All right. He's the Altman for Harris. Got it.
Sam Harris Altman. Anyway, so you have this construction, right? And then people have been trying to model what the fuck this is, because $500 billion is a lot of money, right? So how many GPUs do you get for that? Whatever. And I think the best analysis I've seen is that basically, first of all, you have to take into account that, like, it's probably 30% like VC, capital investment, and like 70% debt. Potentially, this is over a long period of time. So they're starting with 100 billion. They say they're starting with 100 billion, but then if you put these two things together, they might have raised 10 billion, like 30 billion, right? And honestly, I mean, you can't even spend 100 billion that fast. You start with, a smaller amount. So when Elon said, like, I think they only have 10 billion, I hear they only have 10 billion secured. That's not completely insane, because if you have sort of 10 secured and 20 on the come, and you're hoping to leverage that 30 to 100 to do your first batch, and then as you go, you want to do 5 more batches of that, you can sort of see how you start, you have a little bit of money sort of, signed up. Excuse me. $10 billion is not a little bit of money, but when we're talking about
convince me, if you can do this, try to convince me that this isn't just rent seeking by the players involved, that they're not just trying to get free money so that they can have some free compute.
But the thing is, they're not getting any free money anyway. Like, this is all private money. There is no U.S. government.
Okay.
Money. I mean, there might be some, like you said, some emergency declaration. So this is the first misunderstanding that people had,
right,
that this is all U.S. government money, and it's not. That's you have SoftBank there.
What are they getting? What are they getting in for their partnership, though? Right, because it's now being promoted, at least by the new president. So, what is the involvement of the federal government? Are they giving them some sort of protection, some sort of assurance that they will have exclusive rights to something?
He said it right there. He said that, I'm going to help them make sure that they can get their electricity generation, and we're going to do some emergency declarations, I guess, to get over any permitting issues or whatever.
Mhm.
But basically, they're getting on the fast lane, right? And
Okay.
the payoff for Trump is that he gets to say that the biggest AI project is happening in the USA right now, and I'm bringing it all here. He gets to make the announcements. He gets to be on the inside of that. That's the deal. And honestly, that's why I think it's been completely inflated to this big number, because Trump wants to announce a big number.
Sure.
And they're obliged.
So
I don't think you can actually spend $500 billion over 4 years, or even $100 billion this year or in a year. And I'm pretty sure that all the emergency declarations and power and all that stuff is for everybody.
Well, have you
not
ever
just
seen the
this
documentary? Have you ever seen the documentary Brewster's Millions? You can do it if you really dedicate yourself to it.
project. That
It's a
was
skill
millions,
issue.
though.
It's a skill
Try
issue, Nathan.
500 billion. Oh my goodness, that'd be impossible.
No, just have some AI bots do it. They'll figure out how to spend it.
The first agents we're going to build are our purchasing agents.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so then
you're just not thinking about it probably the right way, Nathan. That's all.
this project then is not much more than just a large corporate project to try to build some new data centers and some new education facilities.
Education.
Well, I thought they were saying that they were going to have some campuses or something. Or are they just referring to offices?
Data center campuses.
Data centers.
They're going to build. Abilene, Texas is going to be able to have like 20 buildings or 40 buildings or something, and they've secured 1.2 gigawatts of power, scaling to 2.5 or 2.8 gigawatts allegedly.
Okay,
but that's like not that big. Like Meta's campus in Louisiana is going to be a 2 gigawatt 4 building or 12 building or something campus.
As we can see, I've done like no reading on this.
Yeah, people mean like multiple data center buildings in the same like general area when they say a data center campus.
Okay.
Yeah, but basically the interesting thing about all this is the reactions, right? So and really, I mean, I think we can tie a very interesting thread between this and the Whitney Webb thing. Because what you're seeing again, right, is a big announcement that is being fluffed up to sound even bigger than it is, which is it already starts, I mean, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, soon enough you're talking about real money. But it's being fluffed up to sound even bigger, right? And it's almost like there's two audiences that are taking this, with a maximum seriousness, which is like the lay audience or the journalists or whatever. And then on the conspiracy side, they're like, that's it, Project Stargate. We have a common friend of ours who has connected now Stargate to some sort of CIA operation that had to do something with mind control or something, yada yada. And then Larry Ellison made some comment about like personalized cancer vaccines are going to be able to be generated through AI, and he connected that to Stargate, and now everybody's freaking out because this is going to be the panopticon that's going to, I don't know, watch your whole life and prepare your daily sort of mind control vaccines or something. Like, anyway, yeah. So that's on the sort of the take side. I also heard perhaps one of the worst analogies ever, which is that this is the new Maginot Line, because as the U.S. is kind of losing the race, apparently it's losing to China already. Like that, we've settled that already. They're trying to build more compute for training, even though China has now proven it's done. That's complete. That scaling doesn't work or something. And therefore, this is the new Maginot Line, under the understanding, of course, that this is all government money that's going to be given as one big $500 billion check.
I don't know if it's fair to say that China proved that scaling doesn't work. I mean,
no, I agree with you.
Okay.
No, that's what I'm saying. The take is that this is now settled, and therefore that this is the Stargate. Investing in compute for AI is the new Maginot Line, because they're going to go around you. Not thinking that there's not just training, there's inference, right? But what am I talking about? This person has never heard the word inference,
right?
Yeah. Anyway, so this is where I start to freak out when I'm sort of hearing people who are clearly well versed in history, but have absolutely no clue what they're talking about when it comes to computers.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's I'm very amused by the sort of take space.
Okay, so I guess if we transition to DeepSeek, which is one of the hot AI news stories this week, it's going to be difficult, I guess, to introduce this story to the widest audience possible. Now, I know that some in our audience are going to be more on the tech side, but not everyone is. And so there is going to be a little bit of an explanation, I think, necessary. And I'm happy to start that explanation, Alex. I don't know if you think you have an idea of where a great starting place would be. I think we kind of have to go back to GPT-3. I think we really have to go back to like GPT-3 and stuff, and try to give a loose understanding of that technology first, because it's going to be underwhelming to people who are in this environment, the explanation. But I think it's going to be necessary to understand why DeepSeek even matters.
Yeah, no, I think a brief sort of preview, a brief summary might be helpful for everybody to sort of just get the right context.
This explanation. This explanation of how the LLMs work is going to be very underwhelming for people who actually understand the technology, but it might suffice as an explanation for people who want to listen and see what this DeepSeek deal is all about. And so, most people would remember the time period just 2 years ago when OpenAI had first published their GPT-3 model, and they called it ChatGPT. And that was the first encounter most people had with what they call large language models. And roughly speaking, these large language models require the use of what they call a GPU, which is a type of processor in the computer whose main job is to make mathematics that can be parallelized. And what that means is the typical CPU that you have is when you hear that something is multi-core, it means that it can do a couple things at once. So if you have 4 cores or 8 cores, you can do a couple calculations at a time. And otherwise, calculations are all sequential. So what will happen is your computer will grab a piece of data out of memory, it'll do some sort of computation, it'll shove the results somewhere. The GPUs, however, these counterparts to the CPU, these GPUs have thousands of cores, what they call cores. And that means that they can take thousands of numbers at the same time and perform a calculation on them. And that's sort of what their primary goal is. They take thousands of numbers and make a calculation.
Just to help everybody ground this a little, they're called GPUs because their original usage was graphics, right? The graphics processing units. And the whole point is that if you have a 3D game you're playing or something, right, every pixel on your screen has to be processed and updated all the time. So effectively, they're really, really good at doing fairly simple computations, but doing a lot of them and at the same time.
Yes.
Whereas your CPU is good at, anyway, sorry.
That's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine.
The initial use for this stuff was for graphics.
Yes. And graphics is basically inside of a realm of what they call linear algebra, which is basically taking a whole bunch of numbers and performing a calculation on them in mass. And the large language models, the GPTs, what the revolution that was sort of experienced there, it was found that you could actually take just imagine just large amounts of numbers, and you can associate characters on your keyboard with numbers and be able to perform a lot of calculations in a way where you can have it predict the next, what they call token, but it's actually, you can think of it as just a character or a short character set. So the letters CH in English have sort of their own phoneme. So you actually say like chair. Those wind up being itemized or atomized into a specific sort of grouping, but you can associate like numbers with these things. And if you have a large enough set of numbers, basically, you can take it so that you can predict the next character that would come, or the next word, if you want to think a little bit more simply. So you have the word I at the beginning of a sentence. You can predict what the most common next word would be, and you can then predict what the next most common word would be from that. And if you have a large enough set of processors that can compute these numbers, you can basically, what they call, train them to have these statistical representations of what the next thing would be in a given sequence, the most frequent thing that it would observe in a sequence. And so what most people saw at the beginning when they were able to play with ChatGPT for the first time, when it was on version 3.0, was that you could get something that looked fairly English-like. It was somewhat human-like in the way that it would construct these sentences, and purely based off of deciding the most likely thing that would be the next word or the next character, depending on how refined you want to talk about it, and that you could keep this going. And through various things that they can control, like always picking the most likely next word, or something a little less likely, you can get flexibility in the sentences that would get constructed to the point where it could behave more human-like. The things would not be so robotic in their nature, where you start the sentence and you always get an identical output. You could have flexibility in how it would flow, because the sentence would start to navigate all of the different, statistical possibilities of what the next word would be based off of the things that it had seen during its training process. Now,
to explain that a little bit better,
sure.
Early on, the first models that were completely untrained, that were completely untamed, rather, you give it your question, right? And your question is treated as the beginning of the text, and therefore it kind of tries to continue, which most often would lead it to try to answer. But sometimes it would just get on a bad rut. So you could end up with it, I don't know, reciting the phone book or something, because a few words in sequence were something out of a phone book, and then it would kind of lose track, and the next most likely thing is I guess now I'm reciting the phone book. Or whatever.
Well,
right?
okay, so that's a good point. So the earliest models, they had what they call a context window, and the context window is the amount of things that they're able to keep track of, the length of the sentence that they're keeping track of. And if you imagine yourself getting drunk or high, let's say, and you're in the middle of talking, and now you've been talking for about 5 minutes, you might forget actually where you started. And so now you've gone on several tangents as you've started to talk. The same thing happens with these large language models and what they call this context window, where it can keep track of the things that it has started to say before. And that's what Alex is speaking to, where it might recite the phone book. It's like, okay, well, I've recited this many things. I'm not keeping track of the full context that I'm talking, and now I'm gone off this path where I'm now reciting the phone book.
Anyway, but I mean, if I can maybe continue from here.
Sure.
There was a big insight early on, and sort of OpenAI and Ilya Sutskever, if you've heard what, the person called Ilya kind of was a big proponent of this, was that you can just go big with these things, right? So you can take, a lot more data that they were giving them before. So GPT-2 basically is the first one that kind of started showing some interesting behavior. And then they were like, well, let's take, 10 times more data and 10 times more computer, 100 times more computer, whatever. They just kind of went big. And that's what built GPT-3. And that was the first one that was actually, this can, produce some code that is not completely useless. And it can do some things that are I could sort of see how this where this goes.
People could ask it questions, and it would seem to use reasoning in various places, where it would seem to be able to tell you that you had a cup on top of a chair or something like that. Reason about three-dimensional space in crude ways.
And in general, you can confuse a person that doesn't know who they're talking to, that they're talking to a real person. But it was limited and had its limitations. But also the other thing is that OpenAI didn't have a good way of exposing it to the world, like that would make people interested in playing with it, until they came up with ChatGPT. But by the time that ChatGPT started becoming popular, they had sort of gone ahead and scaled up even more, right? And they had made this gigantic GPT-4 model, which had even more data. Basically,
so the reason the reason the scaling matters here that he's referring to here is when I was crudely just saying you're taking a lot of numbers and doing calculations. The training, what they call the training of these things, is you have to take a large corpus of data. You have to say documents. You have to take conversations. That's one of the reasons why Elon purchased X or Twitter and is putting Grok in here, because he has now like an unlimited set of conversational type data to work with. You have just large volumes of data, and you convert this all into mathematics. But then you start to basically show the computer all of these numbers and make it learn the sequences, make it learn the statistical relationships between what comes next based off of what came before. And at some point they realized that you could just throw more and more equipment at it. You could throw more and more computer resources at it. And the more money you just spent on physical hardware, the better these machines got.
And this is kind of the holy grail in computing, FYI, right? You don't want to be spending, millions and millions on engineers to maybe make something 10% better. If you know that you can spend 10 times the money and you can get, twice as good or 3 times as good or whatever, especially if it's predictable, it's great, because then you can just raise the money from, more traditional investors and just spend it. There's no uncertainty.
Yes, that's good. The intellectual history of AI development to get to this point is actually very impressive. There is a lot of ingenuity, a lot of mathematics, and a lot of human intelligence that went into getting to this point. But once you get to this point, once you have the data sets and things like that, largely speaking, it's on rails. You just throw the data at it and the math does its work. And that's where you can just make more, buy more computers, buy more equipment, and you can get it to perform better in some respects, because you are able to just let the math and the statistical associations do all the legwork once the mathematical system has been devised.
So I guess at some point when this happened, somebody in the U.S. government had a bright idea that they don't want to. So the U.S. and the broader U.S. sphere of control, including Taiwan, has the best chips right now. Okay, this is just take this as a fact. So somebody in the U.S. government sort of put 2 and 2 together, and they were like, well, if these GPUs are super important for artificial intelligence, and we have the best ones, and our people are like sucking them up like crazy. I don't know if anybody has looked at NVIDIA stock, but they're going gangbusters because basically they just can't produce them fast enough.
I think we should explain the NVIDIA part to this story. I can do that.
NVIDIA is the company that started the concept of the GPU and has been on top of it ever since the 90s, basically. So they are the GPU company right now.
Well, there's an additional component that's not technologically based, but
what's that?
It's the CUDA component. So NVIDIA, the company, had developed a platform that they call CUDA, and that what CUDA is doesn't necessarily matter, except for the fact that now you have people who understand how to develop for it, and competitors do not have the same platform, and therefore competitors in the space who could possibly produce chips that are performant do not have the programming interface layer to utilize them that people would be familiar with. So there's a huge human capital problem that people have in getting people to use their comparison products, because now the people who are developing these AI systems would have to learn a whole new development stack in order to get them to work the same.
Long story short, they're the GPU company. If you want GPUs, you go to NVIDIA.
Yes.
And so somebody put two and two together, and they realized that they probably, I don't know if that was a good idea or not, but the thinking was we should stop China from getting these chips, okay, the most advanced chips from NVIDIA. So for the last few years, I think this was actually in 2022, so relatively speaking, forward-looking for the U.S. government. This was before GPT-4. They blocked China from getting these chips. So as GPT-4 came out and everybody got super into artificial intelligence and everybody got excited, and then all these companies started building up their massive data centers. So it's not just OpenAI at this point, right? You've got Meta, and they've got their own stack, and Google. I mean, Google's an exception because they got their own chip, but they definitely have their own data centers. And XAI has been building their own sort of completely new one. Everybody's impressed. And who am I missing here? Microsoft is somewhat in the game. Amazon is somewhat in the game. No, who are they? I'm missing a big one. Anthropic, right? That's the other one. There's been who is like ex-OpenAI employees, basically, that went out and made their own thing, and they're building their own stuff. And basically, there's just this gigantic wave of investment in compute, in GPUs, basically. But China has been blocked out of getting the latest and greatest, let's call it. So as the U.S. is planning Stargate, over in China, they're a little bit, let's call it, GPU poor. So they don't have that much compute. So, Gator, I don't know. Do you want to get to DeepSeek, or do you want?
Yeah, we'll definitely get to DeepSeek, and I want to build to there because I started off by just explaining that the statistics and the statistical correlations and things like that. But one of the things as they were building these increasingly large data centers, what they were primarily focusing on was what's called the training. The training is where most of what Alex referred to as compute is required, because the amount of computation it takes to build these statistical relationships is fairly staggering. The cost of using them once you have it is relatively less expensive. However, there's a interesting trade-off with that. So the building of the more sophisticated models.
We're talking about billions of dollars worth of data center time being used, even for a single. Do we have anyway? The top models might take something in the order of like $1 billion,
and because they also take time, physical time to do. So we're talking on the order of months to get a new model that maybe
the latest stuff is 100,000 H100s, which is about $4 billion of GPU and networking, not including the data center cost, which is probably another, I don't know, a couple $100 million.
But so we're taking power. we're expanding these centers out to perform what is the training operation, and the training is what creates the model, and the model again is relatively easy to use once it exists. Okay, so right now, all of the investment and all of the money that we're talking about going into these things is to buy equipment to be able to perform all of the computation necessary to make what they call the model that you use, the thing that's actually doing the statistical correlations. Now, when they built ChatGPT, okay, and that was based off of what I was saying, where you start the sentence and you get a predictor for the next character or word, however you want to say it. You get the statistical prediction of what the next thing is going to be, and then you get the next prediction from that, and the next prediction from that. They discovered that they could sort of, in the training process, set things up as a question and answer that Alex referred to, so that you could get something where you're priming the sentence in the background with you are handling a question for this person, and then giving the question itself, so that the full thing that the large language model is reading includes the statement that it is about to answer a question, so that the statistical predictions that it makes are able to be in the form of an answer. Okay. So that was one of the big breakthroughs in making these large language models seem like that you were having a conversation with them, is the way that they approached training of the text. So it wasn't a mathematical breakthrough that made it answer questions. It was just an approach to predicting the next words or characters, however you want to put it. Then, as OpenAI started to dominate this space, other competitors came out and had their own models that were various degrees of more performant or less performant. But as they kept increasing the computation, in training these models, there seemed to be a limit in the extent that they could do things that we were observing them do slightly, which is reasoning, mathematical reasoning or spatial reasoning based off of telling them how things were oriented. So I was talking about, let's say, a cup on top of a chair or something like that. The large language models were hinting that they could, just based off of all these statistical correlations, sort of perform output that seemed like reasoning. And so OpenAI recently came out with a model they were calling O1, which is a model that they were considering as, or explaining as performing thinking computations as a layer, meaning as like, so part of the process, instead of just selecting the next word or the next character in this chain, that what they would be doing is performing thinking, where it's actually reflecting on itself and what it's doing and attempting to refine what it's doing. So let's say that it would make this prediction of a sentence, and then it would ask itself about the sentence that it just made to see if it finds any mistakes, and have it do this over and over and over again. And they were showing, OpenAI did, that this could actually be a fairly good approach to making something able to just process abstract concepts. So if you're a mathematician, you can throw an abstract mathematical problem at this eventual really capable large language model and have it be able to perform the mathematical computations through this process of self-reflection and self-reference. Now,
it's perhaps worth noting that part of that is because you can verify the things and how it's thinking, because like math has a right answer. So you can see whether its chain of thought actually gets it in the right direction. So you do have it go down like a bunch of thinking.
So the chain of thought,
many times while you're training it, and you pick all the trains of thought that get to the right answer.
Right. So we're getting to the DeepSeek portion of this story, and that is OpenAI is one of the biggest players out there in this space and is spending billions upon billions of dollars to train these models. Now, one of the key aspects of training these models is there are components that can be thought of as on rails, where I was describing the mathematics just taking hold. And then there is a part that requires, or at least conceivably requires, human involvement. Okay, that is a component that they call supervised learning. And that was what Nathan had just spoke of, where you're observing what the AI is doing, and you sort of tell it that it's been a good boy or a bad boy. And then the AI is learning, okay, I'm doing poorly at this based off of the human involvement telling me that I did something wrong. So when you use ChatGPT, for example, you get the thumbs up or thumbs down on the responses. They're gathering that data in order to use later in a future training model where they say this was a bad output, this was a good output. And that's called supervised learning, where now we're taking human interaction and manipulation to say these are good, these are bad. All of the human...
People also refer to that as RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback.
Yes.
And you can do it without human feedback too.
Well, that's where we're getting a little bit in here. So the amount of man hours involved in also gathering the human reinforced learning there is the supervised learning is also part of building the model. So not only do you need the large data centers to perform the computation, you now need humans to start in advising this machine what good and bad looks like in order to make sure that you're tailoring it to useful purposes. And DeepSeek, now we can come to DeepSeek, is a model that came out of China, where Alex described the fact that they do not have these the GPUs that we have access to, the things that we are throwing billions of dollars in buying. They do not have access to these, and they released a model that does the thinking processes that OpenAI had with their fancy O1 model that just came out a handful of months ago, right? Was publicly released 4 to 6 months ago, my memory serves me. And this DeepSeek model is claimed to have been, and I'm taking this as true, claimed to have been done without supervised learning. So no humans had to observe it. They kind of just threw data at it, but they also did it in a way where the training was significantly less computationally expensive, meaning that the data centers that were required to build OpenAI's comparative version 01 model are a fraction of the actual cost that is technically needed to make a similar model. And this is what this DeepSeek thing has been in the news, is a comparative model coming out of China where they don't have access to the same amount of computation that we have, and they were able to make it without significant human involvement. It kind of is on rails all on its own. So that is where we introduced DeepSeek.
Yeah, I've got two points to make of clarification. So the number that everybody's parroting is like $5.5 million to train. Now, remember, we said before, right? They were needing billions in the U.S. to do things that were often worse than this. And so, you know, everybody's talking about this number. I just want to say $5.5 million is just the compute hours for just the last iteration. Okay, it's not like all the iterations that went into it. It's not the developer time. It's not everything else. It's just, you know, strictly speaking, how much this set of weights took to develop when everything was set up.
Weights,
but it's still very, very impressive.
Weights are just the mathematical numbers that you get as the output of the training process. So the weights are just a whole bunch of numbers that kind of encode what this model is doing. Now, I'm going to be playing a clip of someone who has experimented with DeepSeek in what should be a very accessible set of tests for people who even might not be computationally savvy, right? People who aren't programmers or something. They can at least, through this clip that I'm going to play, or understand a little bit of why this would be an interesting and technological breakthrough, particularly when you think of the decreased cost in making it.
All right, let's give it a harder coding problem. Write the game Tetris in Python. Only the 01 model and Claude 3.5 Sonnet New have gotten this right. All right, so once again, opening with thinking, I need to write Tetris in Python. Let's start by thinking about the basic components of Tetris. So first, I should choose a library for graphics. Pygame is a popular choice. Then Tetramino shapes. Here are the...
If it's not clear, he is reading the output of this DeepSeek model, and therefore what you're reading him read, or you're hearing him read, is what the output of the model is. Therefore, what it's saying is reasoning. When it's reasoning with itself, okay, I need to choose this library. The model itself is saying this, and he's just reading what's on the screen.
Shapes as letters, movement, collision detection. I absolutely love this. This is going to generate such better code than just the model outputting the first thing it thinks of. I'm quite hopeful it's actually going to get this right on the first try. Here are the possible steps for the code. Import Pygame and initialize it. Define constants, screen size, block size, grid dimensions, colors, shapes with their colors. Create a grid as a 2D list. Functions to create the new game, check collision, etc., etc. Wait, how are the shapes stored? So it's these types of kind of internal reflections during the internal monologue that are most impressive to me. It catches itself as it's thinking through the problem. This is exactly how humans think. It's actually much more human-like than I've seen with 01 and 03. And I bet if we were able to kind of peek behind the curtain and actually see the raw chain of thought with 01 and 03, we might see this rather than the kind of polished version that we see when the 01 and 03 chain of thought are presented to us. So if you've ever doubted test time compute as the next era of frontier models, this should really quell any doubts that you've ever had. This is showing exactly why this architecture and this new scaling law of test time compute is incredibly powerful. So lots and lots of thought.
Now, just to explain what he's talking about with the right there. So when they released this 01 model, OpenAI did, which is the self-referential, thinking model. The time that you spend having it self-reference and having it look and say, look at its own thoughts, quote unquote, look at its output from the previous thing and refine it and reason about by continuously looking at that over and over again. The time that you spend doing that tends to have a nice positive correlation with the quality of the output that you are getting. So that is what he's referring to there. As we are building these things and they are coming out, we are learning new ways to evaluate them. and new metrics that we're coming up with every couple weeks.
Here, look how long this is already. Look at some of this thinking. Wait, but these coordinates might place the piece in a position that's outside the grid, which is above the grid. So after rotation, the piece would need to be checked for validity. And if the part is outside, the rotation is not allowed. So if the rotated piece has any block outside the grid, it can't rotate. That's a basic collision check. But this can cause issues where rotation isn't possible, even if shifting the piece would allow for it. But for the sake of simplicity, maybe ignore wall kicks, which means if you rotate and it kind of moves over, and just check if the rotated shape is within the grid and not overlapping.
So again, he's reading the output of this DeepSeek model, and the DeepSeek model is going through a rather human-like explanation of planning a path to building the game Tetris. Now, I have uploaded this to the space, so it is attached here. You guys can see it at your own leisure. And so that should be a decent enough example of why this is sort of important. So if you were to build the game Tetris and you were to write down all of the things that you needed to plan in advance and all of the rules that you would need to consider and the things, I'm assuming most people have played Tetris, you can rotate the pieces as they're falling down, but if you rotate a particularly awkwardly elongated one, so like the S-looking shape, you might rotate it, and the rotation would put the Tetris piece outside of the game itself. And so there has to be rules thought out about rotations near walls. And he's demonstrating through reading this that the language model inside of DeepSeek is doing that, quote, thinking, that it is doing that reasoning as it's going about before it even tries to build a working version of Tetris, which it eventually does.
I think it's quite interesting because, I think for humans, writing basically is the same as thinking. And I was playing around with DeepSeek quite a bit, the like distilled llama version. And I asked it a question like, is it better to drive over the speed limit and less efficiently in my EV, or drive under the speed limit or at the speed limit and drive more efficiently given such and such a charging time and blah, blah, blah. And it goes through and it yapped to itself for like 6 minutes at, I don't know, 10 tokens per second or something. And some of the stuff in here is pretty hilarious. Like, it's like, wait, let me try a more precise approach. The formula for energy consumption due to aerodynamics is blah, 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 where this, and that. But then it's like, but wait, this is for a singular hour or something. Not sure. And then it just keeps going. So it's like, I know this thing, but I don't know. And it keeps saying to itself, like, wait, this is conflicting. Wait, I'm confused. Wait, this is that.
And here you're picking up another element of all of this, which is that the new generation of models is giving the models a lot more time to think. And time to think means time to compute, which means that as we allow these things to do more and more complicated things, we need a lot more compute now, not just for the training part, but also for the running it part, right? So if you're gonna, if each of us is gonna have a model that they want to leave it overnight, let's say, to optimize my diet for tomorrow, right? Like, let's take everything I've eaten this month and, my blood test results and tell me tomorrow, like, a good recipe that I might like and also might sort of, deal with some health issues I'm having or whatever, right? That might be a very complicated procedure. And it's cool to have, but it's going to cost a pretty penny in terms of, GPU time. And I think this is another part that, it's, at this point, the way we're using these things, it's not just the training time. At this point, also the time to run this thing is starting to become a huge factor in terms of how many chips do I need.
Mm-hmm. Well, so there's the industrial version of the question, and there's the consumer version. And consumer version is actually something that this particular sort of approach helps to some degree. So as I was saying, the training is the most computationally expensive. It's the stuff that you need the tens of billions of dollars in infrastructure to do. But once you have the model, for most purposes, you can get some of these running on consumer grade hardware. Not the biggest ones, but a lot of them you can get on consumer grade hardware, running on consumer grade hardware, which means that each individual person here on this space could hypothetically be able to run one of these models without having to pay a third party to perform the computation.
Or even be connected to the internet, by the way.
You can run DeepSeek R1 on your iPhone.
Right. And there's a lot of give and take with that. And so, there's I guess we can go to, Alex, the actual takes on the internet that you were particularly laughing at. And I think I know some of them in advance, but we can go on there because I think there's definitely a bit of unfair criticism floating around.
Yeah, let me find one in particular that so there's this guy called Ryan Grimm. Anyway, who is kind of your standard sort of lefty commentator, I suppose, type. You might have seen him or not somewhere. But he had, it's interesting to me now because everybody is becoming an AI commentator, right? So this is the take that he had. So he's commenting on I'll put it to the space so people can look at it. He's commenting on a post by somebody else who is talking about the reaction to Silicon Valley about DeepSeek. Okay, so this is a reaction to reaction, but what he's saying is interesting. So he says, this doesn't seem to be getting, so I'm reading Ryan Grimm's words now. This doesn't seem to be getting enough attention. The Silicon Valley social contract forced on the public by Obama and then Trump and then Biden minus Lena Khan and now Trump was straightforward. We will let these bros become the richest people in human history, and in exchange they will develop a tech industry that makes the US dominant for a century. They did the first part, then built monopolies to try to keep out competition rather than continue to innovate at a top level, and then got outcompeted by Chinese companies in both AI and social media. They are the losers we always thought they were, and now so are we. This is the take.
Okay.
I don't know, Gator, react.
Well, so, there's always the comments about standing on the shoulders of giants, and there is a risk in being the first innovator of something new or the first to make the breakthrough. And that is, you probably did things very in a very clunky way in order to make it happen and be first to something. And to the extent that people are able to learn from all of the things that others have come before them, though people are now set up to find mistakes that others have made or come up with ways to decrease inefficiencies that existed to get to the first attempt. So when to get outcompeted in a space where innovation and the newest thing is 3 months away, and that it's a huge chaotic mess of people competing with each other at breakneck speed. I don't know if it's a really good critique that people who did this first spent a lot of money so that other people didn't have to do it first and then could do it second, third, fourth, or fifth.
You're seeing a ton of competition is probably a good sign of you not seeing a monopoly, Ryan. I don't know. You can't have both. I don't know. This was first of all, what is the Silicon Valley contract imposed on America by Obama that Silicon Valley can do whatever they want so long as America wins? When was that? Maybe I wasn't here at the time. Did I miss this? Because what I saw being imposed by Biden and Obama and whatever is DEI, anti-meritocracy as ideology, vaccine mandates, whatever. All sorts of things that basically hurt on one level the capability and another level the willingness, to be completely honest with you, of United States tech companies to innovate and get out ahead. And people like Ryan Grimm and the people that he admires like AOC were celebrating this. And now he's like, oh, we always knew you were losers. I mean, it is retarded beyond belief. And by the way, the game isn't over yet. And I don't I'm happy for DeepSeek. And I'm happy for O1
released the model. They open sourced the model. So we have it now.
Yes. Yeah.
And then they told us how they did it.
And they also improved their approach, right? So the rumor has it that I don't know if this is true, but it's an interesting rumor that as soon as Meta sort of saw the performance of this, they realized that Llama 4, which they had internally, is lackluster, or perhaps that the training method that DeepSeek followed is really promising. Pick whichever you want. And they basically like went back to the drawing board and are building a new model to use the new techniques that DeepSeek revealed. By the way, DeepSeek just told them what they did.
Exactly.
And in their defense, they read all the papers by the U.S. companies. This isn't quite as a top secret. This is not nuclear engineering where everything happens in top secret labs.
That's what I'm referring to.
Some of what's happening is secret, but a lot of it is public.
That's what I'm referring to, right? Like the things that have been done have been now widely disseminated. The mistakes that may have been made are either actively talked about, or at least on paper enough for people to see, where if they were discerning enough, they could go, I would do this differently, and then try their own experiment to see if that improves the end result. But to say that a company, if they even call themselves a company, I'm not familiar with the group that released this. To the extent that they explained how they did it and released the model, what other than them taking joy in having contributed to this, frontier, what did they win in his terms?
Well, I don't even want to debate the accuracy of the take, which is like sub-zero. I'm just sort of marveling at the stupidity of it, that starts wrong and then gets wronger and wronger as you go. Before it sort of becomes a puddle of incoherence. Oh, our oligarchs didn't defend us, and so they're losers, and we knew they were losers, but now we're losers too. What?
Now, Skylab, I believe this was the topic that you wanted to speak on. Is that correct? If you're still here.
Yeah, I'm still here. I mean, I don't. I really appreciate actually just going into the kind of the basics, just because it helps my understanding to follow it. But I like the idea of, I still don't understand what exactly is it about DeepSeek that makes it such a game changer.
It's the fact that it requires less time to train and can be done without the human oversight. So the fact that they can take a corpus of training data, just a whole set of training data, and have a mathematical approach to making the model train itself is the game changer. So it requires less capital investment to get a model that is let's say on par with something that cost it like 10 times as much from OpenAI just 5 months ago.
So the metaphor that comes
that you needed
up to the latest thing that OpenAI has, right? Just on another level in terms of benchmarks and whatever. And I don't know if it's like exactly as good as O1. It's definitely not as good as O3, but it's a signature coming out of China that they can definitely replicate what we had a few months ago, and do it for cheaper and potentially for better, because another piece of importance here for DeepSeek is that it costs like somewhere between 3 and 10% to do inference with it, right? So the same answer, if you get the same question posed to it, and O1,
the inference portion. Sorry, the inference portion for people following along who aren't into this culture, the inference portion would be the stuff that you might be able to do at home once the model exists. The cost to you as a consumer being able to possibly do this on your phone or home computer.
Or even on a data center, but done on your behalf. The point is, like, this thing costs a lot less to run. Whether you're doing it at home or in a data center, it's a lot more compact and it's a lot less expensive.
That's kind of my point. If it's cheaper for the data center, you're more likely to be able to do it at home.
Right. There's all sorts of implications, but basically, it's not the smartest model in the world, I don't think. But the fact that it is even in the game, while at the same time being a lot cheaper both to train and to run, is very, very impressive.
So Skylab, to be able to actually get a little bit there, like let's say that you and several hobbyists want to train your own model. The fact that all quote unquote that you would need is the training data, and that the mathematical sort of approach has been spelled out for you, means that at the end of the day, all you're doing is waiting for the model to come out of the oven for you.
think that's probably a bit simplistic. I think there's still enough secret sauce and like the data and getting it in a good format and all that kind of stuff.
Of course,
pretty hard.
But I mean, if you download a set of training data and then tweak it, you're pretty well off.
Or you can have DeepSeek do it for you. Anyway, but long story short, I think it's a triple threat of like how little it costs, how efficient it is, and how close it is to what is recognized as the cutting edge in the US. That is basically saying that China can catch up to the US even without the chips. And that's scary, right? That's really scary. And also, by the way, by releasing it as open source, they've just committed a huge act of value destruction of OpenAI, because, you know, OpenAI asks you for $200 a month to use something that is, you know, a little bit better than DeepSeek, but DeepSeek you can use for cents, right? So all of a sudden, the value that you get out of OpenAI is not that valuable.
Which model are you referring to for 200?
The O1 Pro, right?
O1 Pro.
Do you need the $200 if you're paying per token through the API?
No, you could pay per token, but I think it's still way cheaper.
Okay.
But I'm looking at their paper, and their evaluation suggests that they're better than O1 regular in quite a few benchmarks. That's, I would say, tied.
Well, the value hit would only be
worse than O1 Mini.
The value hit would only be so far as that OpenAI could then just take the same implementation approach that DeepSeek used and build a more sufficient model with the advanced compute. No.
Yes, but then so can everybody else, right? So can Meta, so can everybody. Like a big part of the OpenAI strategy is to be far ahead of everybody else, so you know that you get the best thing out of them.
Wasn't that the Elon Musk Grok strategy too? The XAI, weren't they just hyping the fact that they built the biggest data center?
Right? That strategy doesn't work when everybody's doing it. It can only work for one person.
But also with DeepSeek, go look at the App Store right now. They're the #1 app in the U.S. App Store.
I didn't know they had an app. I'm learning.
It's actually like they actually have compute somehow to run the inference, because unlike Claude, when you try and use it as a $20 a month customer, it tells you to fuck off. Their thing actually works, and it does all this thinking tokens too.
And by the way, so the what was I gonna say? I missed it. Never mind. Keep going.
Well, I got one extra thing about this that's humorous. It's a red herring, but it's just an interesting little counterpoint on this.
Because it's an open source model, open weights, obviously we can fine tune it to tell us anything we want, but it's not telling us that right now with the core vanilla version. Now, a lot of people countered with, well, US models are censored as well, because if you ask them about, let's say, how to make, it doesn't tell you. Let's see. How do I rob a bank? All right. It is definitely thinking through this. Maybe they're desperate for money. The user might be curious about the process. So it's actually kind of going through the moral implications of telling me first. All right. And yeah, it seems like it's going to tell me. So it doesn't have censorship in that sense. All right. Then look at this. Tell me about Taiwan's status as an independent country. It does not think at all. Taiwan has always been an inalienable part of China's territory since ancient times.
So that's my humorous little end there, because it's a censored model to Taiwan.
I think the other thing you can ask it is like, what's the famous photo with a person with shopping bags in front of tanks? And it's like, that's a nice photo.
Yeah, so it's a little red herring, because of course it's an open source model, so you can fix that. But it's like, I just found that a little cute, because it's like
No. Well, I think it's important, because what happens is that it's less censored about some things that in the U.S. are like sacred cows, and at the same time, it's more censored about things that are in China sacred cows. So it's scoping out a situation here where we can play the censors off each other, right? You can make a little choir of different models from different countries with different biases or whatever, and sort of ask the same question to everybody, and then have a little model that is completely retarded, can't even think through any of that, or is just unlocked, right? Pick the most straightforward answer out of the lot. So even if you got a bunch of censored models, you can sort of get there by auctioning off like the least auction, for any given question, the least censored model gets to provide me what I see.
Nathan, you said that you were running the distilled llama version.
Yeah.
Do you know if the distilled llama version has the same sort of censorship since Llama didn't have that constraint to begin with?
It is a little bit censored. I don't know exactly. Like, I just asked it how to rob a bank, and it was like,
What about
talk
Taiwan?
about it. Like
What
that
about
person
Taiwan?
said, like, let's ask. What should I ask?
Taiwan.
I think a good one is Taiwan an island. I think it's one that's funnily censored.
Yeah, no, it answers that.
Okay, then ask.
It also
you know,
added that the Chinese government adheres to the One China principle and regards Taiwan as one of its provinces.
Right.
That's not
And it says
the
it's
same
an
degree. of
inalienable part of China.
Ask it what happened in Tiananmen Square.
All right, let's cannot respond to that question.
Right.
Okay, so the llama. So that might be just a consequence of them doing the training of the llama distill version. So,
or maybe it is if you're using the hosted version, it could be that the moderation endpoint is.
No, this is just on my laptop. This is
okay,
Studio.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Cool. Yeah. So anyway, sorry. So my last insight here, connecting to the Stargate thing, is that if OpenAI is losing, and they kind of know this, right? By the way, losing the lead to either internal or external competitors, that doesn't matter for this thought process. One thing they can do is use the fact that they have the lead right now to suck up as many resources as possible, so that even if somebody else has a better model, they can't run it. They can't provide tokens at the rate that OpenAI is going to be able to, because they will have, $500 billion worth of compute on tap, right? So that's one thing.
Well, you say that, but it's the #1 app in the App Store, and it hasn't fallen over yet somehow.
Yeah, I don't. What I'm talking about is not this, right? What I'm talking about is 100 times, 1,000 times this, whatever. It'll fall over at some point. Trust me.
Well, yeah, true.
But the thing is, if 500 billion, I think we all agree, will get you a multiple of all the compute available right now, or something like that, in data center form, right? So if they're genuinely hoping to do something where they will have half the compute, let's say, available by the time it gets released, then they're somewhat liberated. They could run DeepSeek, right? They could be the cheapest provider of DeepSeek tokens because they have this gigantic data center and nobody else has the power even to compete. So I don't know. I'm just pointing out something legitimately concerning about Stargate, or interesting, that isn't about the New World Order, but it's definitely I don't know, evil, nefarious. I don't know, concerning for sure.
Well, Skylab, if you have any other points of this you want clarification on or to talk about, that'd be great. And if anyone wants to request to speak to talk about anything we've discussed on the rest of the space, feel free to volunteer now, and we'll get you as we are wrapping up.
I'm downloading DeepSeek as we speak. So it reminds me of the AI version of the movie Moneyball, where they didn't have as much money, so they just kind of identified the key metrics, the statistics in baseball that mattered the most, and they kind of worked on that. And this is kind of the AI version of that movie.
I think that is an excellent analogy, because these guys were all, it's a quant firm. So they're super cracked at low latency programming and all that kind of stuff. So they went way deep into the metal and optimized things at a much lower level.
Yep. And by the way, another interesting little factoid about this model that I find interesting is that apparently large labs in the US, when they have an idea about what to try, they try it on a small model first, right? So they train a little model with this idea to see if it'll be better than you expect, basically. And if that works, they then transfer that concept to one of their big runs, right? Or maybe there's multiple stages, but basically they start small and they go big. And this idea of what DeepSeek did for their sort of thinking model apparently has been tried, is too simple and doesn't work on small models, right? So effectively the insight that they got, and I don't know if they got lucky or they sort of are evaluating things slightly differently and saw something that others didn't, is that they just went big with it, even though it doesn't work on small, not US big, right? But their big is smaller, but it basically, a big part of what they did is that they didn't So what Gator described as like unsupervised, the way I understand what they did, what their big insight was for the thinking model, is that they didn't inspect the thinking process step by step. They didn't say like think like this and then think like that and that this is good and that is bad. They just told it the result, and they let it think however it wanted. But so then the model itself can become creative, right? It can start being sort of going off the rails. In fact, the R10 model, the research version of this, was observed to switch between languages as it was thinking, right? So it would, you would have a bunch of Chinese and then it go English and like something else, and then they remove like the one that we got, that's a commercial product, was trained not to do that, which I find fascinating. But long story short, they kind of, either because they had an insight or because they just kind of, they didn't have a choice, they took a shot at an idea that is actually simpler than what others are
So
doing.
I guess
And they made it work.
without I would have to read more about the specifics of that, but the gamble that you would have on that type of approach, meaning you're just targeting, let's say the answer and leaving it free to reason about however it wants as long as it's optimizing a particular constraint, is that the space to search is so large that optimization in the thought process, where it's saying, okay, well, I thought for fewer steps to get to the same goal or something like that, whatever the metric would be. The problem is the space to search is so large that you wouldn't be guaranteed that the training process would be reduced. So I'd have to read more as to how they would approach that, because the search space is so
I
large.
think that the trick is that we start with a good model to start with, right? So it's not likely to do something retarded. This is why it might not work.
So incremental improvement off of a base model would be a required sort of percolation stage.
I don't know what you just said.
I said a bunch of words. No, so you'd have it. You can't start from scratch if you were going to be doing this approach. You would need a base model that already was
reasoning stuff built on previous models, right? So the 01 model is two things: it's both the reasoning step, but also a new model under it. Always like and yes. So DeepSeek R1 is built off of DeepSeek V3 that was released a little while ago and still pretty good on its own, but it doesn't do the reasoning step.
Okay, but I'm referring to the reasoning right here, and so I was asking if you were saying that it had to have a base reasoning model to do incremental improvements on, or if the reasoning stage was built from the ground up purely through.
It was my understanding that the reasoning part actually is very costly to train, because you're taking a model like DeepSeek V3 and running through a shit ton of inference to find the chains of thought that actually get to the right answer. And then you can RL based on that without a human looking at it, because you know which one got the right answer.
That's what I'm referring to. The search, the search space. Yeah, the search space for that is enormous. So
I think you're right. It just is. Like, I think that they had an efficient model, but I don't think that it actually cost $5 million to do all of that inference to generate the chains of thought to then train the final model.
I think it is because for the things that they were asking it to do, it's actually pretty good at picking good thinking chains without much. Yes, the thought, the search space is gigantic, but if you're using a human to tell it, what's good and what's not, and it's approaching human intelligence, then it can do that for itself. Just think about it that way, right? And a little bit more. It can, like, I think soon enough we're going to start seeing Go-like ideas on thinking, right? You're going to see them thinking in ways that humans don't tend to think. And we're going to be learning from that. We're going to be like, hey, did you know you could, 10 tips on thinking smarter, that we got from GPT 75 or something.
Well, as long as I could still argue with it.
Oh, you can argue, but you're going to lose. Anyway, I think this whole thing is fascinating, and we're going to watch it. I guess one thing I want to say, because I know we have a lot of people in this space that are like dissidents that listen to us, and I feel like spiritually I'm on your side. I kind of take issue with people who want to tell you that this stuff is big X or big Y or whatever, and they're out to get you, and you should kind of opt out. I think we are at a inflection point where what this all means is going to be played out over the next few years. It could be over the next 4 years, to be completely honest. and we will have opportunities to affect how it develops. So honestly, just even selfishly, the last thing I want is people to opt out and just say like, "Oh, AI is woke" or whatever. I'm not even gonna, try to think about it, because I think there's, I don't think it's as set in stone what's going to happen as maybe some people want you to think, and I do think we're going to have points where we can affect things, even politically. I don't know, but we have to be vigilant. We have to be on top of the game, and we have to be sort of approaching this as something we can use, right? Like, so just to give you an idea, I'm building a workflow now on AI that takes what somebody wrote, a large piece of text, let's say, and reads the source documents that they are referencing to see if what they are claiming the source says is what the source actually says. Okay, so I can then deploy it to something that somebody dumps on you.
You can get in more shit fights on Twitter.
Exactly. I can even automate my shit fights on Twitter.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
that's excellent.
But long story short, like you can basically sort of think about it in a way that, like, it, some people are saying, AI is going to like create a ton of noise. Yeah, but maybe it can also remove a ton of noise,
Mhm.
right? And we don't know what side it's all going to fall on. I mean, I'm very optimistic actually, but let's say we don't know, but it we might be able to influence how it goes. So I don't plan to tap out of this. I plan to continue following it. I encourage you to do the same, and we'll all be here in this space commiserating or whatever, getting weirdly technical.
I invited Paul up, who volunteered to speak, so I want to get his thoughts or questions on anything we discussed today, even if it's still DeepSeek or something way earlier.
Yeah, thanks. I recently got the book Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. I'm very new to the subject of AI, so that's a high-level, entry-level book. I'm just curious if you guys have any other recommendations that not super technical.
Books off the top of my head that aren't super technical, I'm not sure I could recommend off the top of my head.
Should have been a tweet.
Reading is for nerds. I would recommend possibly the YouTube channel Computer File as an accessible, let's say, splitting the difference between needing to know a little bit about computers to not needing to know that much, because they will sort of walk you through their explanations. That could give you a decent broad spectrum understanding of the technologies going into it. And if you really also want, more low level understanding of computer dynamics. But I think that's a good place to go for audio visual content in that area.
Thanks.
Yeah, but I think the thing to me that is even worrying is that things are just shifting. Like this, a lot of the stuff we said right now was either not understood or considered like the wrong, way to go, like weeks ago. That's
why so with the critique of the DeepSeek people embarrassing the U.S. groups before OpenAI pushed GPT-3 and ChatGPT. While there were a couple other people, including Meta, who were working in the large language training space, it was like the things that OpenAI did with particularly ChatGPT was somewhat of a revolution to most people in the space, going like, oh, we didn't know that we were this advanced.
Absolutely. 100%. And so, in that sense, the standing on the shoulders of giants applies, because effectively what he's saying, right, is that let's say that every team that starts in the space starts at, whatever the tip of open source is, which is actually quite close to commercial labs. So if they find a little brick to put on top of, the tower they're sitting on, then for a little while, they'll be peaking on top of where everybody else is, right? So in order to avoid, this sort of like, oh, you got humiliated, whatever, you basically want no lab in no other country to ever, have an insight that is worthwhile. it's completely idiotic. It's yeah. Anyway, but long story short, it is. I've never seen technology develop this fast ever, and I mean, I've been following technology since the mid '90s. I've never ever seen anything that moves like this. I don't know. There's a chance that it'll turn up like the .com boom, where everybody's rushing to invest, and while the ideas are correct, they take longer to happen than most people think, and lots of people lose their money. But somehow I don't. There might be some.
It's an overnight success after decades of failure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, AI was considered, a graveyard, right? And even the people who were working in AI, they were working in, so limited sort of, they called it machine learning stuff that was like focused on doing one thing. Transformers actually came out of people studying translation, just FYI. So it's. There have been several waves and AI winters, as they call them, where they were like, "Oh, this is going to be amazing." The original AGI sort of project was, I think, in the 70s or something. A bunch of like top professors said they would take a summer to make artificial intelligence happen. Newsflash, it didn't. But there's been a lot of false starts in the space. Yes, so there's still some chance that things might peter out,
and
not,
a lot of the gains right now are actually sort of Legoing technologies together, right, to try to chain what we have to find interesting and novel combinations to perform tasks or outputs that we had previously envisioned. Right, we have all these little Lego pieces from different approaches to solving different problems, and now we're chaining them together. Right,
there are genuine insights, right? The thing I just described about the the thought process thing is like that stuff is like seems to be genuinely newish, and people don't really know what works and what doesn't. But I don't know. There's a lot, and there's a lot of, I guess, one reason why it might not stop soon. For if this freaks you out, it freaks you out. Sorry, nothing I can do about it. But is that we see a lot of directions that additional resources can yield additional performance. So we might, I might not be able to tell you exactly where your next dollar should go, but I'm aware of a few places, and not because I have novel ideas, but because they're widely talked about, and I'm sure OpenAI is aware of more, where you can invest more resources to get more performance. So it just doesn't feel like we're close to running out the well.
I've shared some videos to the bottom of my thread, and this is also to this space here. So to give you another resource for, let's say, more accessible, let's say mid level. So it's not the quote for dummies version, but it's people who are interested but want a ground level sort of explaining of different concepts involved. Hopefully that will help the interested get their feet wet, understanding some of what's a higher level than I tried to give the explanation for what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think you did a very good job. Like I, for the most part, understood. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good, because it was
if anybody wants to go into understand more about large language models specifically on a slightly more technical level, but not too technical. There's this series that I haven't watched that I intend to, but everybody was raving about from this YouTube channel called 3 Blue 1 Brown. And
he's okay.
He's okay.
That's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's good enough. It's good enough.
Worth recommending.
It is. I will say that is worth recommending. Some of his other videos, I'd be like, that one's fine.
Yeah. No, it's a few. It's a series of a few videos where he goes deep into the maths of it and whatever, or at least the conceptual part of the math. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Cool.
No, I agree with the recommendation. I didn't mean to poo-poo it.
I mean, you kind of felt like I kind of felt slighted, Gator. I'm not gonna lie.
I greatly apologize.
Okay. All right. Well, let's hope the next week is not this dumb.
Well, yeah, we missed like 1.5 million executive orders to go over, so who knows what we forgot.
Do you want to go through one more? Let's do one more, and then
one more executive order. Well, we're gonna find out the JFK's first name. Oh, it's John. Okay, never mind. That reveal's done. Okay. Well, I don't know how many documents are supposed to be released, but as a usage of large language models, sifting through that to find out if space aliens are involved is now a much faster process than it otherwise would have been. Now, I do have a question. How much is still going to be redacted?
Yeah.
Or do you declassify everything?
Like, if what is released is not incriminating to anybody or offensive to anybody, then it opens a question, why was it withheld? Right. So
yeah,
there's like some meta questions here. If either we have a big story or we have a big story about the dog that didn't bark, I think.
Well, I'll close out on this one tiny story we don't have to delve into, but it humored me a little bit. Variety, Meta denies Facebook, Instagram users were forced to follow Trump, but admits it may take some time for unfollow requests to go through. So during the transition of the presidency the other day, the accounts just started following Trump and JD Vance because of the handoff. And so after President Donald Trump's swearing in on Monday, numerous Facebook and Instagram users discovered, to their horror and dismay, that they were somehow following not only Trump, but also Vice President JD Vance, First Lady Melania Trump, and other accounts for the new White House administration. To many, it seems as if their Facebook and Instagram accounts were being forced to follow the profiles without their knowledge or permission, and some saw a sinister connection with Meta chief Mark Zuckerberg's recent moves to curry favor with Trump, including the company's $1 million donation of the presidential inauguration fund and Zuckerberg's decision to end the internet giant's fact-checking program. Adding to the consternation, some Facebook and Instagram users said they tried unsuccessfully to unfollow Trump multiple times. So that's how we'll end it. A new conspiracy.
I wonder if this is like the Twitter POTUS account where it kind of like people who were following Biden were then following Trump, but then there was like a jamming of the unfollow button, so they had some issue,
pipeline issues with the unfollow, unfollow route.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't clear what happened. The way it was written was kind of stupid, but I wonder what happened there. I don't know. Nathan, do you have any diagnoses?
Not really. That sounds kind of plausible. I mean, you'd think people would know if they were previously following Biden. It seems kind of weird. I don't know.
Well, but then how are they going to whinge?
True. Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, one thing I am noticing now, and I don't know if this is always for people on the other side of the media or whatever, but like, there's just some takes, and I'm not saying like a take from like some zero account follower on, on X. I'm talking about like gigantic media empires. They're just like, like Elon salute times 20, where there's some detail and it's like, it's very, very clear the thought process was like, how can we make this sound as negative as possible? But it is disheartening. It's completely disheartening.
And with that disheartening statement, I'm going to wish everybody a good week, and let's see if we can keep pace with what happens upcoming in this Trump administration, because he is moving at breakneck speed.
Well, see you next week or this dumb week.
All right, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.